Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1329 of the War News stream. And we have very big news today from around the world. And we are seeing that Pakistan is once again attacking Afghan forces as tensions are escalating rapidly. We've also seen that Belarus is warning of nuclear war over Tomahawk missiles being sent to Ukraine. And also, U.S. forces struck another Venezuelan boat as the Navy lurks around the shore of Venezuela. And we have very big news today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to hear significant developments from practically every single region around the globe once again. And of course, we have been able to hear significant news of the continued full-blown war that is now going on between the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. As battles have continued to rage along the border, the Pakistanis have now been able to achieve complete superiority over the Taliban on the battlefield and now control significant parts of Afghanistan inside of the border regions of Afghanistan, and are currently leveling and destroying border checkpoints and continuing to attack Taliban forces throughout the area. NOTAMs have been issued throughout a large part of Pakistan to allow for Pakistani Air Force operations to continue, but it does appear that while the Taliban were able to achieve the element of surprise, and therefore the larger amount of losses on the Pakistanis, at least within the opening hours of the conflict, it now appears that the tables have turned completely against the Taliban, and largely the conflict is now spiraling out of their control. The Afghans have continuously reached out to the Pakistanis to request a ceasefire, but all attempts have been for naught, and it appears that the Pakistanis are now adamant on continuing this war until its completion and eventual victory. In the meantime, we have also been able to hear that the Republic of Belarus, or the dictatorship of Belarus, under Lukashenko, has threatened the West with nuclear war today if the United States is to provide the state of Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles. The United States of America has been unfazed from this threat, and it does appear that a major announcement about the provision of Tomahawk Tomahawk cruise missiles will be announced sometime this week by the United States of America at the United Nations and NATO summits. The General Secretary of NATO has also made a direct statement today, stating that China and Russia are largely working in cahoots with each other, and if China prepares to conduct an amphibious landing or invasion of Taiwan anytime within the next 2 years, it is highly likely that they will coordinate that with the Russian Federation, starting a larger ground war with NATO to try and tie up larger amounts of resources and personnel inside of Europe, instead of allowing for them to all flow towards the defense of the island of Taiwan. The Chinese have also made it quite clear today that they will continue the trade war till the end, and the United States of America is now stating that we will retaliate by suspending all trade with the People's Republic of China on cooking oils, which, crazily enough, is a fairly significant trade that we have with the People's Republic of China. The Russian Federation has also been dealing with its own major issues today, as a large amount of heavy industries in the Russian Federation are now switching from the 4-day work week to the 3-day work week, as the Russian economy continues to slow down into its final collapse phases. The Russian Federation has been looking to alleviate the situation, but Ukrainian attacks on Russian key infrastructure and resources continue to ensure that the Russian Federation cannot recover from the crippling hits that Ukraine has given in the past, and the Russian Federation continues to suffer until this day, and well on into the future as a result. The United States of America has also conducted a significant strike on another Venezuelan narco boat off the coast of Venezuela, while the United States is still trying to appear to drag the Venezuelans into attacking the United States, so it can be publicly stated as a defensive war against the Venezuelan government. And we've also been able to hear that all 20 hostages that were living have been released by Hamas, but the dead have not been released yet. The President of the United States has voiced some concern about this and displeasure, but it does appear that the ceasefire is still continuing forward, although it is now clearly starting to show to be on shakier ground. We are going to be making sure to cover all of the major news that we have today, including the one little piece of news that we have, that Madagascar is now in the middle of a military coup, a minor piece of news, but one to cover nonetheless. We are going to be making sure to cover all of that today over the past 48 hours, and everything else in between, starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on down into the smaller stories as we get through the news tonight. But of course, today is another major news day, and we will be making sure to get into our first and largest story right here at this moment. And so moving on into Afghanistan and Pakistan, we have been able to hear that the war has continued on. And for many who have been saying that the Pakistan-Afghan war was nothing more than a smaller border skirmish, it appears that that statement is now no longer true, as Pakistan does control significant parts of the Afghanistan border inside of Afghanistan, and have been using this period to actively destroy border checkpoints and crossings that have been set up by the Taliban, and are continuing to conduct actions against the Taliban inside of Afghanistan. We were able to see up within the most northern regions, near to the Nuristan National Park, that the Pakistanis did conduct a strike on an Afghan outpost within the area, most likely used for border control, destroying it. You can actually see it here at the beginning of this clip. The footage dated to today, the 14th of October of 2025. The outpost is directly on top of that hill overlooking the valley, and we can see a direct Pakistani hit directly onto that outpost, knocking it out. The strike was apparently quite significant, and we do understand that the Pakistanis are attempting to bombard most major border checkpoints along the entirety of the area, whether they are under Pakistani control or not, to further degrade Afghanistan's abilities to protect their borders into the future. We are not exactly sure what the end goal of that is, as that may create larger situations between Pakistan and Afghanistan in the future due to a lack of border control within this area, but this does appear to be a continued campaign by the Pakistanis, as we were able to see another Afghan Taliban outpost on a mountain near to the area of the ranges close to the city of Peshawar on fire as well from another Pakistani strike conducted overnight.
Honestly, the Pakistanis seem pretty effective with this too. Not that the Taliban have major air defenses at their disposal, but it looks like they're getting through with pretty much all these strikes, and they're pretty effective from the looks of it.
From what we can tell, the Taliban does not have a large amount of combat capabilities in really any measure, even equipment-wise. And this is something that was actually misanalyzed at the very opening of the battles. But this is also something that we keenly noted, and now it appears to have come back to bite the Taliban later. Many of y'all will remember that in the first opening day of the major battles that began on the ground after the Pakistanis had been airstriking the Taliban, There were a large amount of units from the Taliban that were conducting massive firefights along the border, and we all noted that they were expending exorbitant amounts of ammunition. It appears that they consumed so much ammunition, they actually apparently ran out of it, because we haven't really heard of most units giving any form of resistance to the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis have pretty much walked right across the border, facing little to no resistance from the Taliban, and are now controlling significant areas around the border region over the past 2 days. That is something that is quite important to remember, folks, is that while the Taliban did get equipment, quote unquote, from the United States after our withdrawal in 2021 because of its abandonment at Bagram, none of that equipment is incredibly large or potent, at least in terms of firepower. The Pakistanis are equipped with operational main battle tanks, something the Taliban really cannot boast unless we're talking about older T-55s and T-62s from the Soviet Union that largely are not that operational or are not up to a high operational standard. The Pakistanis can also count on artillery support, something that the Taliban apparently do not possess in any number at all. In terms of direct fire support, the best thing that the Afghans have that kind of fills the role of a tank or an artillery piece is a recoilless gun like the SPG-9. We did see that the 201st used the SPG-9 prolifically in the first day of the battles that occurred on the border, but since then we have hardly seen the Taliban using even recoilless rifles for that matter, meaning that most of their infantry are not supported by tank or artillery support, which is crucial for modern warfare, generally meaning that Taliban forces, when engaged, if they ever choose to engage the Pakistanis, are generally pinned down due to the superior firepower of the Pakistanis and then destroyed in detail due to their lack of an ability to also try and equally suppress or counter battery the Pakistani forces which are attacking them. Another important thing to point out is that Afghan equipment, at least in terms of vehicles, is also incredibly light. While the Taliban does possess some MRAP style vehicles or mine resistant armor protected vehicles, most of the vehicles that they actually have in their possession that are operational are Humvees, which are incredibly lightly armored and have been pretty much phased out throughout most of the regular army here in the United States due to their lack of armor protection. For that reason, the Taliban, at best, usually are able to field motorized infantry units with absolutely no armor or artillery support of any kind, meaning that the Taliban's armed forces are incredibly low quality, and that is certainly speaking to its own degree with how badly the Taliban are now losing this war on the Pakistani-Afghan border. Not only that, moving further on down, we also got to see some more tank and rocket fire was apparently happening along the Pakistan-Afghan border. We are highly believing that that was the Pakistanis firing onto the Taliban, as we do not believe that Taliban main battle tanks could even be transferred at such a fast rate to make it into this area, considering that the larger part of their T-55 and T-62 main battle tank fleets would have to be transported by truck over arduous roads, which are hardly paved, into this area to be able to try and engage the Pakistanis, which is highly unlikely, and also those tanks would most likely be destroyed once they made contact with the Pakistanis, as there is generally no air defense to try and protect them once they engage and are visibly spotted by the Pakistanis. Moving further on down the border, we also saw more border outposts being destroyed by the Taliban, including some absolutely baller music, which we can see the outpost literally being leveled by one explosive. These outposts that y'all are seeing in this clip were actually directly controlled by the Pakistanis when they were being destroyed, and are being destroyed after they have occupied the area to stop the Taliban from having any usable facilities once the Pakistanis eventually withdraw from this region. We can also see another border checkpoint being destroyed here as well by Pakistani demolitions charges, most likely set by the Pakistani Army Corps of Engineers.
Seems like we're seeing a lot more Pakistani strikes than we are seeing Taliban strikes on Pakistani targets at this point. It seems like the Taliban have sort of taken a back seat. They're still trying to defend their place and also doing small arms attacks, but not really like large explosive mortar style attacks that the Pakistanis are conducting.
It appears that generally the Pakistanis are pretty much running the show at this point, to be entirely honest with all of y'all. We have seen hardly any Taliban resistance over the past 48 hours, and the Pakistanis are largely just running their own military campaign against an enemy that appears to have dematerialized at this point along most of the battlefield. We did hear, however, of an interesting occurrence that we're still trying to get more information about the sounds of firefights and explosions occurring to the Pakistani city of Mastung, which is down here in the Balochistan region. We are not incredibly sure if this is related at all to the Taliban. This may actually be a part of the Balochistan independence movement, which is a terrorist force which operates within this region, but apparently local media reports that there is fighting against an armed group within this area, and considering that they stated that it was an armed group, it seems highly likely that this is not the Taliban. This is most likely the Balochistan independence movement conducting some form of a terrorist attack against the Pakistani armed forces within the area. This is the only instance, folks, that we have heard of all day, mind you, actually over the past 40 hours, where anyone even aligned with the Taliban has been able to engage and actually fight the Pakistanis in an armed conflict. Beyond that, we haven't heard of any armed action, at least directly between the Taliban and the Pakistanis, on the border at all. We've also seen that the Pakistanis are apparently going to be extending their air operations significantly, as they have declared multiple NOTAMs, restricting several key airways in Karachi FIR from the 15th to the 16th of October due to operational reasons. So it is quite clear at this point, the Pakistanis are planning on starting large air campaigns against the Afghans inside of the country to continue to suppress the Taliban, destroy key and critical infrastructure, and to continue their border occupation well on into the foreseeable future. Largely from what we're seeing at the moment, this is, like we were saying on Sunday, turning out to be a full-scale war. And while the Taliban really do not appear well-equipped at all to fight this war, the Pakistanis certainly are, and they are pushing this thing until its completion, until the victory that they'll be able to achieve at some point here in the future once they've been able to achieve all of their goals. At the moment, we do not know what the Islamic Republic of Pakistan's goals are long-term against the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. We do know, however, that the conflict started as a result of the Balochistan independence movement largely getting some element of safe harbor inside of Afghanistan due to the Taliban's stringent enforcement of border control measures against the Pakistanis attempting to chase down the terrorists, but not on the terrorists themselves that were easily able to pass right across the border and right back into Afghanistan. We may see that a ceasefire or a peace treaty that's achieved in the future between the two parties will include something along the lines that the Afghans will have to go out of their way to either destroy the Balochistan independence movement, or that they will allow for Pakistani forces to pursue the Balochistanis into Afghanistan and destroy them at will. At this point, though, however, folks, I would have to tell y'all that the ball is entirely within Pakistan's court with this war, as it does not appear that the Taliban is able to provide or offer any sort of extreme or heavy resistance. Another thing that I'd like to point out as a result of that analysis is that the American equipment that was left behind at Bagram does not appear to have amalgamated to much of anything, at least in terms of the Taliban's ability to conduct offensive wars, or for that matter, defensive battles on their own soil. The equipment appears to have been incredibly light, at least the equipment that's still operational that was left behind, and it also appears that a large amount of that equipment has already been destroyed or abandoned by the Taliban, or has been withdrawn from the battlefield for one reason or another. Still, the Taliban appears to be about as well off at this point as they were in the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. And a lot of people actually have been talking about the continued drone flights that the Pakistanis have been conducting over Afghanistan, as we have been able to hear reports of that as well over cities like Kandahar and Kabul. And a lot of people are wondering, are the Pakistanis justified in all of the actions that they've taken so far against the Taliban in this, I would say, about 4-day long war? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so this is a little bit of a tricky question right here. Is Pakistan justified in taking this action that they're currently conducting on Afghanistan? Because obviously Pakistan is going through and conducting airstrikes throughout the entire territory of Afghanistan, and it looks like, largely speaking, it's very effective. So the Taliban are taking a walloping right now, and obviously I have mixed feelings about that as an American. So we do see right now that the drones are flying over Afghanistan cities, and largely the Taliban are not able to shoot these down, and I would suspect that these drones that Pakistan are flying over are probably reconnaissance drones, and they're probably preparing for more airstrikes near these cities. So it looks like 58% of the audience said yes, Pakistan is 100% justified in these strikes, while 21% were unsure, 12% said somewhat justified but not 100%, and 9% said no, Pakistan is going overboard. So to round this question out right here, to let y'all know some details about it, it's really unclear what started this whole conflict. The Afghani Taliban are saying it was the airstrikes that Pakistan conducted in the first place that started the whole thing, and the Pakistanis are saying that it's the Afghani Taliban that conducted some sort of operations on their border that led to those airstrikes. So Who started it right now? That's honestly a question up for debate. Me personally, I would say, knowing the Taliban and how loosely organized they are, it's very likely that groups of Taliban likely did attack the Pakistani border, and that's probably what sparked it. And therefore, Pakistan was very justified in striking with their aircraft into Afghanistan to respond to that. So, in my opinion, I'm with the 59%. I think Pakistan is 100% justified in this. And obviously, me as an American, I don't have a very positive view of the Taliban. I think they're a terrorist group. And even though they are the official government of Afghanistan, I don't support them whatsoever. 0% support from me. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 59% that the Pakistanis are 100% justified in what they're doing. Funnily enough, folks, this channel always prioritizes our analysis from a pro-American and pro-Western standpoint, and funnily enough, we just don't have a dog in this game at all right now in between the Afghans and the Pakistanis, so this is one of the first conflicts we can actually take a step back from and analyze as neutrally as possible. One, the Taliban are definitely terrorists, and they're generally medieval at that, not only technologically, but also culturally as well. They are generally medieval. The Pakistanis, on the other hand, we do have some minor relations with the Pakistanis in the modern day. We used to have significant relationships with them in the past, but generally our relations with them are waning and not really an important concern, at least here in the present day. So going at this neutrally and just speaking about the situation as it exists between the two parties, Pakistan is entirely justified in what they're doing against the Taliban right now. The Pakistani state, and this is something that I want to point out, is that while we do not know the direct armed action that led to this war right now, we do know the underlying issue that did create the armed war. It's just that we don't know what the shot heard round the world was, at least for this particular scenario. But we do know that this entire situation has been created because of the Balochistan terrorist groups inside of Afghanistan and Pakistan, pretty much operating across the borders, and the Taliban doesn't do anything to these groups and stop them from crossing the border into Pakistan, but they will stop the Pakistanis from crossing the border into Afghanistan and trying to destroy these groups when they're trying to escape from attacks that they've conducted in Pakistan. That is something that has created a lot of tensions between the two sides. And technically, the Taliban are 100% within their sovereign rights as the rulers of Afghanistan to stop another armed force from entering their country. But at the same time, they also have a duty to stop armed terrorists from crossing their borders into another country. Otherwise, it would easily be taken that they are in support of that terrorist group and the actions that they are conducting inside of the other country. So it is entirely justified that the Pakistanis would start to take armed action against the Taliban because of that reason, because the Taliban continues to allow, support, aid, and abet terrorist attacks inside of Pakistan through the Balochistan independence movement. And that is obviously clear. As a funny fact, folks, this is the exact reason why Pakistan is bombing the Afghans right now and invading Afghanistan is the exact same reason we invaded in 2001. Don't you see the parallel, Matthew? Back then, it was Al-Qaeda and the harboring of Osama bin Laden inside of Afghanistan, which led to us to invade the country. Right now, it's Afghanistan harboring the Balochistan terrorists in southern Afghanistan near Kandahar and continuing to allow terrorist attacks in Pakistan, but not letting the Pakistanis deal with the terrorists that are causing the attacks.
Yeah, it's generally the same thing. I see the parallel myself. And honestly, at this point, I guess the question is, what is Pakistan's end goal here? What are they trying to accomplish by using these airstrikes against the Afghanis? Because I can see the retaliation aspect of it. Like, obviously, they want revenge for being attacked on the Pakistani border. But what are they expecting to accomplish here? Are they trying to throw the Taliban out of Afghanistan? Are they trying to topple the regime? What is the goal, other than just purely revenge? Because they can't just topple the Taliban, then leave a power vacuum. Then the question is, who takes their place? And there are much worse characters than the Taliban that could replace the Taliban as the government there. So that's a big question to me. So I don't really know what the objective is. It seems like when wars get started these days, there really is no game plan to it. They just merely start, and we just basically see what happens from there, because I don't see an end goal here.
Yeah, I don't really see an end goal in this at all. And honestly, at this point, with the Pakistanis pretty much running the show, they could deal with the Balochistanis in the south however they want in Afghanistan, without a doubt. There's really nothing stopping them at this point. They could go in there and try and wipe out the whole movement if they could, and of course that would never really happen in realistic practice. It would be impossible, but they could still give it a shot if they wanted to. But outside of that, one thing I will say, folks, is that this turned tail pretty quick, at least for the Taliban. When the Taliban first started the conflict, on the ground at least, they made it quite clear, at least within the opening day, that they did have some teeth behind their bark, at least to a minimal degree. But I believe that that's only because, one, they had superior firepower at that moment with small arms, and two, the Pakistanis really didn't have the chance to respond, at least ground-wise, yet, to the Afghan incursions. Since then, they've been losing everything. Every single small skirmish, every single firefight, even if they're happening at this point, is being lost by the Taliban. And so I would have to say, folks, and this is something I have to address because this has been something that's extremely prevalent in the American mind in the modern day. This myth about the United States leaving behind military equipment, which has amazingly turned the Taliban into a military superpower, is a myth. They are getting their asses handed to them right now by the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis aren't even breaking a sweat on this one. While the equipment was unfortunate to leave behind and was a significant financial loss, it does not appear to have changed the Taliban's fighting abilities in any way, shape, or form, and as a matter of fact, they look to be performing as poorly right now as they did in 2001 and 1979. So I would have to guarantee you, folks, that fortunately, the U.S. military equipment that was left behind appears to have not changed the combat readiness or capabilities of the Taliban in any single way. But we do understand that a lot of people are talking about this continued border war and whether it's going to continue to escalate even further, considering that the ball is pretty much in Pakistan's court and they can pretty much dictate the flow of the conflict and also what it will eventually end up looking like. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? Are people thinking that the Pakistanis have a taste for war, or do they think that this thing is going to start rounding out fairly quickly at this point?
All right. So the one thing that we are seeing, we saw the footage come out yesterday and today. The Afghan Taliban, even though right now they are on the back foot, obviously the Taliban are taking a beating right now from the Pakistanis. The Taliban are moving lots of weapons to the Pakistani border. So they're not down and out. Right now they're on the back foot, but they are preparing for something. And the big question is, are the Taliban about to attack Pakistan even worse coming in the few next days? So 71% said yes, the war is about to escalate a lot, while 14% said no, the Taliban are caught off guard and will not be able to attack, and 10% said it's a 50-50 chance. And honestly, I would have to disagree with the enforcer a little bit. I think there still is a very large impact that Bagram has, leaving behind all that American equipment, because the Taliban are not down and out. The Taliban are very resilient. They may not have good sense or good strategy, but they are resilient. And in a war, that actually goes a long way. So the Taliban are probably going to launch a new attack. I'm actually with the 71%. They probably will escalate this because they really don't have a choice at this point. It's gotten out of control and they have to respond, or otherwise they're basically letting their sovereignty be taken over by the Pakistanis. So it's definitely going to escalate. I think the Taliban are preparing something. But I think what you're seeing right here is a major strategy mistake. The Taliban attacked all 7 outposts on the Pakistani border, and they must have expected that Pakistan was not going to attack them and retaliate that quickly, as Pakistan did. That was obviously a big miscalculation because Pakistan is now slamming the Taliban, and the Taliban are caught off guard by it. So it goes to show you the really poor planning the Taliban have, but at the same time, they are not finished. So I'm with 71%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 71%, but not because the Taliban still have a little bit of a second wind in them. I would say generally, based off of the resistance we're seeing right now, I think the Taliban, at least conventionally, is done. If they're going to be doing anything from this point, it may be back to the old terroristic ways like they did towards the United States for 20 years, which is conducting asymmetrical terrorist operations or insurgency operations against the Pakistanis inside of Afghanistan. I generally do not think that there's a lot of fight left in them. It looks like they got it all out within the first 24 hours, and since then we've seen that practically no real resistance has been given to the Pakistanis. The fact, however, that the Pakistanis have not accepted any sort of a ceasefire request, at least at this point, by the Taliban, and are continuing their conflict inside of Afghanistan, are clearly showing us that the Pakistanis have some sort of a larger sweeping goal that they're trying to achieve in Afghanistan at this point, and it has not been made clear to the public yet what exactly that is. But I would have to say that that's generally the camp that I'm going to be in, is that generally the ball is in Pakistan's court, and I do not think that they are at all ready to end this conflict at the moment, also considering that there's really no losses that they're taking right now, and hardly even any direct combat with the Taliban. this would seem to leave the Pakistanis to do whatever they would wish inside of Afghanistan, at least for now while they're there, and then leave once they're done. So I would say for that reason, this will probably escalate much farther, and the fact that the Pakistanis have issued NOTAMs inside of their airspace would also heavily suggest that there may be large air operations being conducted tomorrow and the next day to start hammering the Taliban and their key infrastructure and targets inside of the country to allow for the Pakistanis to start pushing in even farther, possibly an attempt by the Pakistanis to conduct an air superiority campaign before they start a further push into Afghanistan. But one thing I will say, folks, because this is actually an interesting thing that Enforcer Matt and me disagree on, is the impact that the U.S. equipment has had after it was left by the United States in 2021. And Enforcer Matt's generally of the belief that it does help out the Taliban to some degree. I would be of the belief it really does not. Because this is something that I would have to say is a little bit interesting to look at from a historical lens. The Soviet Union left behind loads of equipment when they withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989. And if you ever looked at the U.S. Invasion of Afghanistan in its earlier years, from about 2001 to 2011, you would notice that most of the weapons that the Taliban were using were mostly Soviet-made, mostly all AKMs or AK-74s or RPG-7s or other forms of Soviet equipment. Because just like the United States did in 2021, the Soviet Union in 1989 also left over a load of equipment. And while over the course of 20 years they did end up killing a little over 2,000 Americans, that's still less than 200 Americans killed per year on average inside of Afghanistan, which, when putting that into perspective on other wars like the war in Ukraine, that is an incredibly small number of soldiers to lose yearly. And their combat abilities were also quite weak at that, as the United States was able to usually wipe out the Taliban in droves whenever a larger battle began, like the Battle of Kop Keating and so on, which were some of the largest inside of Afghanistan. On the other hand, the Pakistanis are pretty much in the same situation we were in 2001, but instead of the Pakistanis being equipped with AKs and RPG-7s, they're equipped with M4s and other forms of American weaponry. Still, it doesn't appear to be changing much of anything. It's more so the fact that their small arms have changed manufacturers from the Soviet Union to the United States, but beyond that, their tactics have not changed, their fighting prowess has not changed, their conventional ability to sustain armed confrontation in a conventional setting is completely non-existent, just like it was in 2001. And so generally, if the Taliban was to excel in any form of conflict, it is going to go right back to what it was originally, which was the sort of low-intensity asymmetrical warfare that we were used to in Afghanistan for 20 years. And beyond that, I don't really think much of anything is going to be changing. Humvees and MRAPs will be blown up easily by Pakistani airstrikes and also spotted by Pakistani drones, allowing for them to triangulate airstrikes on those vehicles and equipment, which clearly would be used by the Taliban, meaning that those are either going to be dumped pretty quickly, or most of them are going to be destroyed before they even have a chance to use them. No real air defense was left behind from what we understand, so the Pakistanis by default have air superiority at this very moment. That's uncontested at this point, which also means, for that matter, the ground war will practically be under the control of the Pakistanis, because if the Taliban ever gets the jump on the Pakistani army and a firefight begins on the ground, the Pakistanis are pinned down, they will call it an airstrike, and that battle will change into the Pakistanis' favor practically immediately after that fact.
I don't know. Like, I would still disagree personally, because the U.S. was there for almost 20 years. Like that, it became known as the 20-year war. So we were there for a very long time, and the U.S. is obviously well more equipped than Pakistan. So if we weren't able to pull it off in 20 years, then I would really doubt that Pakistan's going to pull off anything like that when it comes to actually dominating Afghanistan. It's just too much chaos. Like, the way the Taliban fight is very decentralized. It's also, like I mentioned before, they're very resilient. So they can take losses and they will still keep fighting. It's just in the nature of the ideology they believe. They will still keep ticking. It's almost like a cockroach. They can be stomped on, and they get right back up and they start fighting again. So it's really a tough situation. That's why I was asking earlier, what is the Pakistanis' goal here? Because they're not going to be able to dominate Afghanistan. That's not going to happen. The U.S. wasn't able to do it either. So the best thing, the only thing that could really happen here is they get in a prolonged skirmish at the border, or Pakistan starts airstriking, destroying everything they can inside of Afghanistan in the hopes that maybe that makes a dent. But in my opinion, it really won't. So that's why I'm wondering, where is it going to go personally?
Well, if they do not try and depose the Taliban as a legitimate government, which I have a feeling they won't, they will most likely threaten the Taliban as a centralized government, which is an existent institution that can be threatened and targeted, with most likely the threat of death. They'll just start killing everyone in the Taliban government at the high levels in Kabul. And by doing that, they'll say, you either agree to these terms we're laying out right here, or we start killing all of you. And that's what the Pakistanis might start to say here in the near future. And then at that point, a lot of these Taliban leaders, especially Pakistani intelligence is good, their hands are tied. They can either agree to whatever the Pakistanis are telling them to agree to, or they're all going to end up getting killed in Pakistani airstrikes or Pakistani raids, one or the other. And that's something that we actually did not do when we invaded Afghanistan. We immediately overthrew the Taliban government, deposed them, and then set up a new interim government. If Pakistan deals with the Taliban as a legitimate government and does not depose them, that means they can actually threaten those leaders with death, and they are in a position where they can actually be targeted and killed, and it would have some form of an impact.
Maybe so. It's just I really don't see, like, for example, like even if you try to form a government in Afghanistan, and that's contingent on the Pakistanis really wanting to overthrow the Taliban as a government, which I don't really know if that's their actual goal or not. That's a pretty lofty goal there. But even if they were able to install an Afghani government that was separate from the Taliban, we've already seen that they're really not willing to fight for what's theirs. Like the Afghani government that we set up, and also the Afghan military that was fighting the Taliban, they did not hold up well at all. In fact, they fell way quicker than we expected right as we pulled out of Afghanistan just a few years back. So there's really, like, that's the thing. Who's going to take power if the Taliban leave? The Afghan people don't have it in them, I don't think. Like, they just don't have it. That's why the Taliban is in charge right now, because they pushed the Afghani people straight up out of the way and they took charge. So now the terror groups operate in the place, which is obviously not good. But I mean, I don't think, I see some people in the chat were saying that China might come in and try to government. I really don't think that's going to happen. I don't see that happening whatsoever. I suspect that maybe a worse terrorist group might take the place of the Taliban if they were knocked out of the way, which could be worse than what we're seeing right now with the Taliban being in charge. It could be, like, for example, a much worse one, like, for example, a four-letter terror group that everybody's well aware of that's notorious. They could jump in here and try to take it over. There's no telling.
Also, I just saw someone in the chat say, bro is so devil's advocate, he doesn't understand how brutally we stomped out the Taliban and ISIS. I don't know which one you're talking about, because there's actually two of us here. But they said Pakistan probably won't give two damns about committing war crimes. That actually has really no impact. As a matter of fact, it might actually end up working worse than committing no war crimes, because a lot of people think that the more brutal you treat an opponent, the less they'll resist. And that was actually the mindset the Soviet Union had when they invaded Afghanistan in 1979 and continued their war in Afghanistan for 10 straight years. They ended up leveling entire villages and killing everyone in it, men, women, and children, no matter whether they were involved with the Mujahideen or not. And all that did was spread the stories around Afghanistan of what the Soviets were doing, and that actually increased enlistment numbers into the Mujahideen, which later on the Mujahideen would split off into the Northern Alliance and the Taliban, which would then battle it out for control of Afghanistan. In 1995, the Taliban came out as the emergent winner, and the Northern Alliance pretty much went into obscurity and hiding in the northern part of the country. So conducting war crimes, or just generally slaughtering loads of people thinking that that's going to put them down, that actually doesn't really work. If anything, that emboldens people to conduct asymmetrical warfare against you and prolongs the conflict and makes it even harder to quell the disturbances and create a stabilized situation where there can be an exit strategy. Really, it's difficult to get an exit strategy either way, because there will always be armed resistance in the country, and it's also a very heavily decentralized country, for that matter. In Afghanistan, there really isn't a central governance like you would find in any other country in the region, like Pakistan or Iran, or even Turkmenistan, for that example. You don't find central governments in Afghanistan like that. So it would be hard to deal with it anyways, but at the same time, curb stomping the Taliban, which is easily doable, doesn't mean that they go away. Because if many people have been observant, we curb stomped ISIS and they're not gone. They're just in hiding, and incredibly small in numbers. But we all saw, and this is something I know many people saw, because we covered the Syrian civil war and the very last days of it here on this channel. As soon as the Assad government collapsed, ISIS cells immediately started to pop right back up near the area of Deir ez-Zor and elsewhere along the river. That was something that happened almost immediately after Assad fled the country and was pretty much overthrown by Gilani. So we do know that that group was curb stomped, but people who believe in that ideology and are members of that group, they're still around. They just keep it on the down low and keep it in hiding so that way they don't get bombed. Same thing with the Taliban. You can invade that country, but it's so decentralized and people believe in repelling any sort of foreign incursion or invasion in their country. They'll keep resistance going indefinitely, no matter if you deal with it with white gloves or if you take the gloves off. It's pretty much going to end up the same way.
Yeah, I would say so. Also, by the way, if people don't know this, so I'm sure a lot of people do, but just for the people that don't know, the Taliban and ISIS-K specifically hate each other's guts, by the way. Like, they really hate each other. I know people think, well, that seems like those two groups would be friends with one another, but they're actually not. They really hate each other. So it's really weird how that works. It's very complex how these terror groups operate, but they're usually a lot of infighting happening. And also, they're very, very loosely organized. So there can be infighting happening within the Taliban itself amongst different factions. So that's why it's so chaotic, is because nobody really has a centralized leadership. It's just a bunch of chaos. So that's a huge problem. But also, by the way, I see a hell of a lot of people in the chat saying this, which is actually a decent theory. A lot of people are speculating that maybe the U.S. is prodding Pakistan to attack the Taliban in Afghanistan, so that way we can soften up the Taliban and then try to retake Bagram Air Base. I actually mentioned that and proposed that a few days back. That might be what the U.S. is doing here, but there's just no proof of it. So that's a possibility. One thing I would say is not a possibility, though, and unfortunately, let me know if you agree with this or not. I don't think that China, under any circumstance, is going to try to take over Afghanistan. I just don't see that being a possibility. That's something that China would probably not do, just because it's such a large undertaking. It's the same type of undertaking the U.S. failed to do during the 20-year war. So, unfortunately, what do you think about China trying to take it?
Actually, Mandy, I got an even more important point than that. They're certainly not going to take it. But with this whole thing going on, and considering that China has invested interests in both countries, one thing that's guaranteed is that they are going to take a step back and not get involved at all in any way. So if they are in Bagram, they might be leaving Bagram right now.
You think the Taliban, or you think China might be leaving Bagram, you say?
Yeah, because they wouldn't want to show any sort of preference towards either side, because that could piss off the other one, and that could lose them a key member of the of the Belt and Road program. So they're most likely going to take a step back and just go, hey, look, we just want all of this thing to settle out and no one to get hurt, and take that sort of position. But that also means that if the Chinese had any sort of intrigues or ambitions inside of Afghanistan, they're probably going to leave them alone for now until this whole thing blows over.
Maybe so. I mean, that's possible as well. Me personally, though, whatever the Chinese presence at Bagram is currently, which I'm pretty sure there is a presence of Chinese soldiers or at least military representatives at Bagram, it only makes sense because China has a huge interest in Bagram. It's literally right there close to their border. So that's obviously a huge reason to be there. I would say it's probably such a small contingent that they probably would not withdraw out of Bagram because it's not publicized right now. Like, we're speculating there might be a Chinese presence there. And also there's some rumor in the background suggesting that China's operating at Bagram, but it's not large enough to create a public incident yet. So whatever it is, like, for example, if they have people there monitoring the rebuilding of Bagram, or maybe like transitioning it to some type of Chinese rule or something, it's not large enough to make a big deal about.
Yeah, I would have to say most likely so, but at the same time, we can be assured that at least for the moment, China's not going to get heavily invested in either one of these two countries. They're going to take a step back and try and just sort it out from a diplomatic stance instead of getting involved in one way or the other militarily and start to maybe piss off one of these countries as a result of that. But still, a very interesting development nonetheless, and one that we're watching with keen interest, considering that this is a major conflict, one of the few that we've seen in Central Asia since the withdrawal of the United States in 2021 from Afghanistan. Speaking of China and Chinese involvement in things, the trade war is still going on, and the Chinese have stated today through their Ministry of Foreign Affairs that they will fight any trade war with the United States to the end, making it incredibly clear that they're not going to be taking this trade war off unless if some sort of major concession is given to them, and we do not know what concession they're looking for right now. The United States, in return, through the Office of the President of the United States, has started to make announcements that we are going to be halting the purchase of cooking oil, and I want to make sure that we read this out to y'all because this is what we've been able to hear so far. I believe that China purposefully not buying our soybeans and causing difficulty for our soybean farmers is an economically hostile act. We are considering terminating the business with China having to do with cooking oil and other elements of trade as retribution. As an example, we can easily produce cooking oil ourselves. We don't need to purchase it from China. So it now appears that we're attempting to retaliate by threatening to completely stop any cooking oil trade with the People's Republic of China. And for a lot of people, this sounds quite laughable. Cooking oil, that sounds like it's worthless. What the hell could that do? Crazily enough, folks, I did not believe this. Looked into it. The cooking oil trade with China is actually quite large. So oddly enough, this is a fairly big threat to the People's Republic of China, is to stop the cooking oil trade over the issue of China no longer accepting our soybeans. Also, another thing that y'all may not know, this is something very interesting about the whole soybean deal. Most of the soybeans that are grown here in the United States aren't even really consumed in the United States. We export a lot of them to the People's Republic of China. Soybeans are incredibly important in their historic diets, and for that reason, they import a lot of them from the United States, and at quite a good cost. So a large amount of farmers are incentivized to grow the soybeans because they are a cash crop because of the exports to China on the soybeans. The Chinese have largely stopped buying soybeans from us recently, almost entirely, in an attempt to try and conduct some sort of economic damage to our agricultural base. And as a result of that, we are now threatening to stop trade with the Chinese over cooking oil, which in turn will also cause a decent amount of damage to the People's Republic of China because they produce a large amount of seed-based cooking oils. And we also purchase a large amount of those cooking oils from the Chinese. So oddly enough, this is getting very agricultural up in here on this trade war at the moment. Cooking oils and soybeans, but quite interesting development nonetheless.
You know what's funny about this, and some people are about to get very irritated when I say this, but here's the sort of bad side of this whole situation. Where did China go to start replacing their soybean purchases? Because the big deal, like the enforcer mentioned, is China has not purchased almost a single soybean from the United States ever since this trade war got kicked off months ago. So that's why there's tensions, because China's not buying our soybeans and it's hurting the U.S. farmers. Where did China go to replace the United States? They went to South America, and they went specifically to Argentina.
And Brazil.
And you might you say what?
Also Brazil.
Yeah, but mainly Argentina. One of the main suppliers is Argentina. And the weird part about this is Argentina suspended their export taxes on those soybeans literally the exact same day the U.S. pledged to basically bail out Argentina with a $20 billion deal. So Argentina kind of pulled a bit of a fast one, if you ask me. We agreed to bail them out with $20 billion, and then they suspended the export taxes and started selling soybeans to China, which therefore hurt the American farmer that their tax dollars just went to bail out Argentina. So that was a bit of a fast one, in my opinion. So that's the weird part about it. But yeah, soybeans is a huge deal. Like right now, that's really a huge deal because it can really impact our U.S. domestic industry of farmers. And it's currently having a major impact right now.
And our agricultural base is quite susceptible to damage considering how small it is. Only 1% of the American population, actually it's less than 1% these days, it's actually 0.9% of the American population, which is roughly around 2.7 million people, are involved in the agricultural business and in farming, which is an incredibly small amount of people. That means that if any economic damage happens in that industry, and say 100,000 people are affected, that's an actual measurable percentage of the U.S. agricultural base, which can end up having some significant impacts on food pricing inside the United States and also availability of supply here in the future, not only across the seas for our export markets, but also for consumer consumption markets as well here within the U.S. directly. I would have to say that the whole Argentina issue is one that I find quite interesting, folks, and I gotta say, is that guy going to take the chainsaw to that as well, or is he going to reverse that? Because that seems like it was a very un-American sort of a move to start lowering all of the excises that we had on exporting soybeans to the People's Republic of China, pretty much guaranteeing at this point that Argentina has just put the ball entirely in China's court. We really can't even argue with them anymore because even still, they're getting a better deal on the soybeans from Argentina right now than they would from the United States even if we negotiated some sort of a settlement to this trade war.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, I'm not trying to get into domestic politics, but I have no idea the logic behind the $20 billion bailout, essentially, of Argentina. I don't really see the common sense behind that. And also, it really pisses me off to see Argentina pull a fast one after they basically got $20 billion worth of value from this bailout from the United States taxpayer. And then they pulled a fast one by removing or at least suspending the export taxes on the same day that occurred. So you got to be very careful, making friends like this, because they can be one thing to be friends, and it's another thing to bail people out with $20 billion. That's a whole nother animal right there. So I don't know. Like, this is a pretty slick one, if you ask me.
Yeah, this was just ridiculous. Also, Brazil is another larger soybean exporter. They're a part of BRICS, however, and our economic relations with the Brazilians are not extremely massive. I mean, they're fairly large, but they're not extreme. So we don't have as much economic control over the Brazilians as we do the Argentinians. Considering that we literally just bailed out their entire country, you would think that we would have some sort of control on the situation, but it seems like the Argentinians just pulled a bait and switch on us by getting us to bail them out and then immediately screwing us over in the trade war. So I guess a good play on their part. Although I think the United States will have to remember that, and we'll have to put out a tweet on Truth Social that the Falklands still aren't theirs, just to remind them of that whole thing that happened back then that they're still angry about from 1982. But anyways,
Oh, and also, real quick, just a little piece of detail here for the people asking about it. Some people were saying, when you say a $20 billion bailout, what do you mean? I don't know all the details of it, but to give a brief overview of what I mean when I'm saying we're bailing out Argentina, the U.S. provided, allegedly, according to what I've heard, a $20 billion currency swap with Argentina's central bank, which basically what that means is we exchange stable U.S. dollars with the volatile pesos that Argentina uses as their currency. So that's basically, in a very simplified term, kind of what happened with the bailout. But nonetheless, we gave Argentina a lifeline, and what Argentina basically did in return was stab us in the back, in my personal opinion. So that's not a good thing to do, especially when you want a bailout, is to start stabbing people in the back. The fella in Argentina doesn't seem to really know what he's doing that much, and I don't think the U.S. taxpayer should have to foot the bill for that.
yeah, I mean, that's I think that's something that's fairly clear at this point, folks. I mean, when your economy is doing so bad that as a nation you've defaulted and someone's pretty much having to bail you out at that point, there's not really an argument there as to whether or not the guy's running Argentina well. I mean, he literally ran the country into defaulting. That's near impossible in the modern age. I don't even know how the hell he did that. That's something that you would have seen in a late Victorian era with a country like Schleswig-Holstein in northern Germany. You never hear about that in the modern day, a country literally just defaulting where they have to pretty much get bailed out. That goes to show y'all, that's not really, that's not a good investment for the United States, is having some guy in charge of Argentina that can't even manage an economy, or the government for that matter, and they default so that way we have to bail them out. That's not really a country we want to throw money into, 20 billion a piece, because it's clearly going to go nowhere. We're not even going to get a return on that investment at that point. And then on top of that, they do something like this. So, not really the greatest move in my opinion. We'll have to see what in the world we're doing as a result of that, because that really lost us a good bit of leverage in the long run on the soybean trade, because there really is no one else that trades majorly in soybeans rather than the Americas as a whole, as a multinational coalition of soybean producers for the larger part. Anyways, though, we did also hear that the People's Republic of China is, of course, quite serious about this and saying that they will continue this to the end. And a lot of people are talking about whether the Chinese are really serious about that or if they're bluffing. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So is China bluffing or is it serious about the trade war? Because this time China is taking a very hardline approach to it, and they're saying they're going to fight any trade war to the end, which whatever that means. So 55% said China is serious about that, while 27% said China is just bluffing, and 13% said it's a 50-50 chance of it going either way. And honestly, I kind of mentioned this the other night on Sunday. I think China's learned that the U.S. strategy is to go balls to the wall, basically, and see what sticks. So China has adapted their response, and China's decided, well, we're going to do the exact same thing and do the exact same hardline approach and meet it head on. So we saw that the U.S. officials took a sort of like a step back from this once they saw that China took that approach, and they started sort of walking statements back and saying that, oh, well, actually, we have a good relationship with Xi. It's actually okay. Like, don't worry about it, folks. We got this under control. Because they realize that hardline balls to the wall strategy has been figured out by our adversaries and it's not working. So I would say China is serious about it. I don't think they're bluffing. I think with the 55%, China is serious, and they are actually going to go to a trade war, a very serious one, if we push this too hard. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I do believe that the Chinese are serious about this, and at this point, with the bait and switch done by the Argentinians on the soybeans, we're pretty much up the creek without a paddle, and we've pretty much put it into China's camp as far as the cooking oil situation, which we could still screw them on. We can't really screw them over on the whole soybean situation, at least for now, because they're able to replace those soybeans with Argentinian soybeans and pretty much stabilize the costs through those measures. So I would have to say the Chinese are probably fairly serious about this. In terms of economic fallout, For China, for now, it actually will be less. For the United States, it'll be a little bit greater. The Chinese understand that, and they're going to continue to push forward this, given that they have more cards, until they can get some sort of a negotiated settlement that they're looking for. I did see someone in the chat say, why don't we just blockade the Chinese? It would be nice if it was that simple, but blockading a country with a navy and forcefully stopping any ships from leaving or entering China is an act of war. That's an act of war no matter who you do that on. And so you really can't, like, you can't whip out blockades wherever and whenever. It's a nice idea if we want to get involved in the major world war as a result. But beyond that, it's generally not a great idea because we're trying to deal with this as best we can without turning it into a war. That might be a last resort, is to turn it into a war. But for now, we're avoiding trying to create this into a full-blown conflict. So that's why we can't just blockade the Chinese and stop them from getting any imports and exports and then force their hand that way. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, I saw someone say that China holds $800 billion in U.S. debt. It's actually a lot more than that. Well, actually a lot less. Let me go get the debt clock, because the Chinese don't really have the kind of impact that a lot of people have. No, thank you. What is this? What the hell
What
is
the hell?
this? I
Honestly, the silver liberation, more like the gold liberation. Gold hit 4,200, I think, today, which is wild. I think it's the highest in history.
So the U.S. national debt right now is $37 trillion. This is something we have to explain because a lot of people really don't know a lot about how the national debt's broken down. The debt is what we owe people, but it's not always foreign countries. A lot of this debt is intragovernmental debt. So every single year, just to explain this to everyone so that we all know what it is, every single year when a department has not spent all of its money that it was given in the budget, they take out a bond. And that bond says that the government owes them the money that they didn't spend from that year's budget at some point in the future with interest. And then they do that every single year. Most of the national debt is actually from intragovernmental agencies like the FBI, the CIA, and so on that holds massive amounts of these bonds. If you look down here at the bottom, if you can see it, the U.S. debt held by foreign countries is $9.5 trillion, and the Chinese hold exactly $291 billion of that national debt. And in terms of the amount of money we owe the Chinese, that's a drop in the bucket considering that the U.S. GDP year over year is around $27 trillion. So on a gross GDP sort of a figure, the Chinese have, say, it's something like 1% of the U.S.'s GDP annually in debt that we owe them. It's practically nothing. So in general, that's something that I'd like to point out. Like, the Chinese do not own our asses, like a lot of people like to say, because they, sometimes read into the national debt figures completely wrong. We pretty much owe them nothing. Most of the foreign debt that we owe is to most nations around the world, a lot of them inside of Europe and inside of our Western alliance. Funnily enough, we actually owe a decent amount of money to the Japanese. Interestingly enough, we borrow a good bit from their banks as well. So just to put that out there, the Chinese do not own us. Like as far as national debt goes, that's not the case. But anyways,
They can make a temporary dent in our economy though doing that, because they can try to dump the bonds, which will put a pretty big dent in the market. But I honestly don't know enough about it to explain it in detail. To be perfectly honest, I'm not a financial expert, but they do have the ability to manipulate the U.S. economy by dumping those bonds.
yeah, that is true. They can dump the bombs, and that would cause some damage. But at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, the Chinese also have a significant amount of national debt as well. And I think the Chinese also, the United States has a good amount of that as well that we've lended to them through the international monetary funds and so on. And we could do a similar sort of a thing to the Chinese and try and crash their economy the same way. I have a feeling that the two sides are looking at that as nuclear options that they wouldn't want to pull out because they know it'd be reciprocal at that point. So I would doubt that they would use it, but that is still an interesting point.
Yeah, very interesting indeed.
But moving on from that and on out of this whole news with the trade war, we also are going to be moving on into the news that we have gotten out of the Middle East. And crazy enough, folks, we've actually been able to hear of at least some positive developments in between Israel and the Gaza Strip to some degree, which is actually quite nice to see. Nevertheless, before we get on into that news and also the coup in Madagascar, everything in the Americas, and everything in Europe, I do want to make sure that we take a brief pause for a moment to thank a lot of y'all for watching. We have 15,000 people here right now on air, and 60,000 people have watched this stream in the first hour alone. I gotta say, a massive thanks to all of y'all so much for watching so far. I hope y'all been enjoying this. We still have a lot of news to go. and we're going to be making sure to cover it, but we wanted to take a moment just to thank you all for spending your time here on the channel right now and watching your news once again from the Enforcer channel. If you enjoy, please make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have you all here. We run this thing 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every day but Monday, covering the news in the same way, shape, and form every single night. But before we move on into the rest of our news, Matthew, let's get a couple of questions.
All right, so jumping into our first super chat segment here and grabbing 3 of them and then getting right back to our news. Our first one goes to Bobby43, who's also known as LC39A, as most people know him, a channel legend, and he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, good sir, for always being a massive supporter of the channel and helping to keep us running. And Bobby said, in reference to Pakistan, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Honestly, like that was the whole theory, Bobby, that I was putting forward the other day. Pakistan, if you're referring to the United States here on your whole statement, I would say that Pakistan, being an enemy of the Taliban, it does work to U.S. interests. I would say that does work to that degree, but I'm not sure if it's something that maybe the U.S. sort of involuntarily kicked off or covertly kicked off, or maybe they directly worked with the Pakistanis to launch this attack to destabilize the Taliban. I'm really not sure. Whatever the case is, though, it does work toward U.S. interests to destabilize the Taliban. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I would thank you massively for support, Bobby43, and it always is that way. The enemy of our enemy is our friend. That's why at one point, the Taliban, in a sense, when they were the Mujahideen, were our friends way back in the day, decades ago, because they were fighting the Soviet Union. And kind of how the Contras, which turned into the modern cartels, were also our friends way back in the day because they were helping us to fight the communists in Central America. It's an interesting sort of a thing how that pans out in some instances, like with the cartels and also the Taliban. But beyond that, I would have to agree with you, at least in this instance, that with the Pakistanis, they are generally aligned with us. If anything, I consider the Taliban to still be an enemy of the United States, even though we don't really have a direct bone to pick with them right now. It's generally just good to put enemies of the Republic in the dirt, in my opinion, whenever you get the chance. So I ought to let the Pakistanis just keep going at it. I'm not saying provide them with any arms support or any support at all, but just let them go at it and see how it turns out, because only good can come out of it at this point. You know, the Pakistanis will most likely stomp the Taliban on their own and then eventually leave, and they'll send the Taliban back to square one like they were in 2021 again. So with that, a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Bobby43, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running. And also, before we move on, I have seen some people going at it like usual in the chat, so I'll quickly explain this, because funnily enough, folks, I don't even know how, but the guy who runs Argentina is like some sort of a political figure in the United States, and we were speaking about the foreign policy analysis side of things, what's going on with the trade war and the result and the impact that the Argentinians are currently having, and then some people wanted to say that we're clearly communists because we didn't like what the Argentinians did. Let me just put it out there very clearly for folks who might be new to the channel or might not really remember this, might have been around for a while, might not remember this. I am not one, and neither is Enforcer Matt, to get involved in domestic politics. I don't really care if you think the guy is a great guy or a savior. Truth of the matter is, the country nearly defaulted. I think it almost did default, and the United States practically bailed them out. That doesn't really speak a lot to good governance. Like, I don't really care if you like the guy or not. If your country is defaulting and you're pretty much getting bailed out by another country, you're not running a country well. That's just the basic line fact of the matter. So with that in mind, speaking about him doing that, and then speaking about him immediately pretty much lifting all excises on selling soybeans to China and putting us in a disadvantageous position, if you don't like hearing that, I hate to tell you, but that's exactly what happened, and that's the kind of result that it's going to have on the United States. So if you didn't like that because for some reason you think the guy's like some sort of a savior or a cool dude, like, I'm sorry, that's not even a political statement. We're literally just stating what's going on down there and how it's impacting the United States. You know, if that doesn't fit your worldview, that's unfortunate, but I tell you to wake up and smell the roses sometimes because it always doesn't smell nice. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Had to make that clear, though, because I saw some people going, oh, the enforcers are clearly communists because we said that the Argentinians have screwed over America, because they kind of have at this point with the soybeans, and then some people didn't want to hear that. Like, you know, like, I'll say this as well. People do that on everything. Like, for example, when the Israelis hit Qatar with their airstrikes, and I was on the channel saying, look, the Israelis are allies, but they can't be allies at all costs of every other ally in the region in the Middle East. Loads of people wanted to go off on me back then, just a couple of weeks ago, because they said that was outrageous and all of our enemies are worth sacrifice. Well, all of our friends are worth sacrificing in the Middle East for Israel. And then the president sided with me and then made the Israelis apologize to the Qataris, and then also made it fairly clear that American interests aren't going to be jeopardized in the Middle East because we happen to have Israel as an ally and they want to do whatever they want. Unfortunately, folks, foreign policy analysis doesn't always align with your political viewpoint about this guy's great just because he happens to be, or this guy's bad because he happens to be. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're terrible, but the truth is the truth. And each day we just take the analysis and run with it for what it is, regardless of bias. So, anyways,
And also Argentina is no stranger to defaulting on debt. Just doing a quick Google search here, because I don't know the whole history of Argentina, but just a quick Google search, the AI overview says that they defaulted on their sovereign debt 9 times since their independence in 1816.
yeah.
They defaulted in 2001, 2014, 2020. They almost defaulted just about a week or two ago that prompted this bailout. So it seems like Argentina is always on the verge of default. So not what you'd call a great economy. And I saw some people saying, well, Argentina was already having trouble and the current guy is trying to fix it, the current leader of Argentina. And that may be true, but I'm not trying to get into the politics of it. All we know is they sort of stabbed us in the back with the whole soybean situation. That's all we're talking about.
Yeah, like the Argentinian economy, and that was something I was going to bring up. The Argentinian economy has defaulted multiple times. Even after the Falklands War, they defaulted, and that's what led to the deposition of the leader who started the Falklands War by invading the Falkland Islands. This is nothing new. And to say, and the thing I'm saying, folks, here is that Argentina, one, we did them a solid, and we stopped them from defaulting on their loans for the larger part by doing the currency swap, because American dollars are far more valuable than Argentinian pesos and are actually usable on a global scale. That's where the bailout comes in, is being able to pay out loans. Because if you told someone, hey, my economy, I think this is where some people are not understanding this. If you speak on an economic sense, here's what you're saying right now. Hey, my economy's about to default because the country's being run like shit and the economy's going down the tubes. I can pay off these loans in Argentinian pesos, but they're all about to be worthless because the entire country's about to default. Every single loaner is going to go, hell no, I'm not taking Argentinian pesos. That's ridiculous. Your country's about to default and that money's about to be worth nothing. It's not even going to pay off this loan. On the other hand, if we give them US dollars, the Argentinians go, hey, everyone, I'm about to default on my loan. I can pay you off with US dollars, which still hold their value because the United States is stable, and that'll help me to pay off the loan and further avoid defaulting quicker. And then those loaners will go, oh, yeah, that's way better than Argentinian pesos. The US dollar actually has value and is also not going to sink like a stone because the United States is not about to default on all their loans and collapse as a country again. So, yeah, we'll take the US dollars. And that's where people are misunderstanding here. The currency swap is bailing them out because no one's going to accept an Argentinian peso as payment. They're going to accept a US dollar as payment because our currency isn't about to collapse. That's the difference. So
honestly, since my tax dollars and all of our fellow Americans' tax dollars are going to sort of bail Argentina out, does that mean we can sort of adopt the informal name of Jeff Pesos now that we're swapping pesos to US dollar? You can call me Jeff Pesos from this day forward.
Man, call me Jeff Pesos the way I be rolling in it. But anyways, folks, it is time for us to move on into the next question. But a huge thanks to you once again for the support, Bobby43, and I hope I also addressed that whole deal as best as I could for everyone, as much as I could, or make it make sense at least beyond all of the political hoopla that a lot of people like to get into. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and y'all know I had to sneak in the Jeff Pesos in there somewhere. I just love that. Honestly, I might have to change my name to Jeff Pesos one day. I just love that name. But our next super chat here goes to Jake Miguel, and thank you very much, Jake, for that $20 support. And Jake said, "Who is more rat-like, Dmitry Peskov or Master Splinter?" I'm not sure who Master Splinter is, but I can tell you for a fact, I'm just based on my opinion, Dmitry Peskov, he's pretty rat. I mean, I'm not sure you can get more rat than Dmitry Peskov. That poor fella. I tell you what, me, I'd be a radio host. What the hell is that?
This is Master Splinter, and honestly, I thought it was Peskov when I first pulled it up.
Damn, I didn't even know who this was, but this is a doozy here. That's a close call. That might be a tie between Peskov and this thing.
Bro, this thing's about to come out there and go, Russia has a right to defend itself by bombing Ukrainian cities. So, it's about to come out and say that here in a second, man. I bet you money. But I would have to say, in my honest opinion, Peskov is more rat-like than Master Splinter, at least in my honest opinion. And that kind of is getting close to a close call. You're actually asking a really good question. Those are the questions that should be asked, folks. But with that, I hope that does address it the best we can. A humongous thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one goes to Arar983, who put in a $20 support, and thank you very much, good sir Arar, for that support, and also funding our work to help keep us on the air. And he said, Cold Brew Fund, and LOC, long live the Empire. Oh, they believe we're an empire still. I love that good old debate right there.
Oh, and that's actually when we pull it up. And interestingly enough, folks, there have been endless scholarly debates on whether or not the United States operates like an empire, and not recently, as in a political view, like a lot of people are making out to be, just as a mode of business. And there is really no clear answer. Half of everyone believes the United States pretty much is an empire. The other half say that we're not. So there really is no clear answer. So it's really based on your preference and opinion. But beyond that, I do thank you massively for the support to the Coffee Fund, and of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and maybe we'll go over that whole empire thing again in the question segment here later tonight if people are interested in that discussion, considering there's no correct answer. You can argue it apparently forever because no one's ever gone, okay, yeah, that's just the answer we're going with. Still to this day, it's pretty much been debated for about 70 years, I think, ever since you could kind of make that argument, whether it is or isn't, and no one's come up with a clear answer, and everyone's divided on that. But anyways, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news. Thanks to your support to the Coffee Fund, we can be energetic enough to be able to keep this thing running every day, and so we will be making sure to get into the rest of everything that's happened. One, there is a military coup going on in Madagascar. Call it the escape from Madagascar, the way the government be disappearing and just leaving, generally, from existence entirely. We also were able to hear, inside of the Middle East, that a U.S. military aircraft has flown to from Hill Air Force Base to the Beirut International Airport in Lebanon. We are not sure why or what it's carrying. It is an Alice Air 747 cargo plane flying on the behalf, carrying cargo of the U.S. military, because it came from an Air Force base. We do not know what it's carrying or why, but it did arrive in Lebanon. We're going to try and see if we can get some more information on that here in the future. In the meantime, Hamas has released all 20 living hostages to Israel, now meaning that there are no living hostages within Hamas's control at this very moment. However, the dead have not been released, which were also supposed to have been released entirely along with the living. And apparently, the President of the United States has stated that all 20 hostages are back and feeling as good as can be expected. A big burden has been lifted, but the job is not done. The dead have not been returned as promised. Phase 2 begins right now. Phase 2 begins, but we also don't have the dead, so I don't really know what that means, but I guess we're just moving on with Phase 2 of the ceasefire, where the Israelis withdraw a little bit further, and then they get all of the dead, I'm assuming at this point. It does appear that at the moment, things are a little bit uneasy, at least for now. They're going to wait and see if the dead are eventually released. But it does appear that all of the living hostages have been released. So that is at least a positive sort of a tone that we can get from this. And I gotta say, that's actually a little bit shocking. I was generally believing that Hamas would not follow through on releasing the hostages, as that's pretty much their leverage. Crazy enough, they've released all the living ones, meaning that most of the leverage that they would have had has been lost at this point. But moving on out of the Middle East, considering that that's all the news we had from that region today, we are now going to be moving down to Venezuela, because we were able to hear of another narco boat that has been hit again by the United States, and we also were able to get the video of that narco boat being hit in this clip right here. This is unclassified. We'll get to that in a second about why that doesn't matter, but anyways, here's the clip. We can see the narco boat. It's a little fishing boat with a large amount of outboard motors, and it was directly hit, once again by a fairly significant ordnance from what we can tell, and destroyed.
Honestly, these are like appetizers at this point. It seems like I'm really not sure why the U.S. is holding off for such a long time. They keep hitting these drug boats over and over and over, but there's really no real attack on Venezuela itself.
Yeah, I gotta say, it is quite weird. And honestly, at this point, it's like these provocations clearly aren't working, if that's what we're working towards, and I think that's what we are. They're not working, so it's like clearly they have to ramp it up and do something else to get the Venezuelans to eventually respond, because just sitting endless amounts of boats is apparently doing nothing. But moving on from that and out of Venezuela, we've also been able to hear why that unclassified marking doesn't really mean much of anything, at least for most of the major news companies. This is something that we wanted to talk about really quickly because this was quite interesting. Some of y'all may have heard, and I'll explain to y'all what this is. Some of y'all may have heard about the new Department of Defense requirement for the press to be able to get access to the Pentagon. They pretty much have to sign off on an agreement stating that they will not cover any stories on the military whatsoever, even if the information is unclassified, unless if they get Department of Defense approval to release that story beforehand. If they do not do that for every single story that is to be released by the media, those media companies will lose their press privileges to the Pentagon, meaning that they will not be able to cover any further stories on what is happening on the U.S. military, at least direct sourced from the Pentagon. That was something that has been creating some stir here in the public, as many people have been saying that generally appears to be some sort of a violation of free speech, as the freedom of the press is generally celebrated and heavily lauded sort of an accomplishment of the United States of America, and generally any sort of an abridgment or an attempt to decrease the abilities of the press is generally considered to be an abridgment of the First Amendment and free speech and expression as a whole. Interestingly enough, every single news company in America, I'm not even kidding, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, NBC have all released a joint statement announcing their intention to refuse the signing of today's pledge, agreeing to new rules and restrictions imposed by the Pentagon under the new defense secretary, stating the following: "Today we join virtually every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which will restrict journalists' abilities to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press." Generally meaning that
Honestly, good on them for that, because obviously it takes some guts to stand up against very powerful figures sometimes. But this really is a doozy. Like this, not even being political on this, it's a doozy, because for literally the history of the country, news organizations have been reporting from the Pentagon, and now all of a sudden, unless you sign onto a pledge, now you can't report on the Pentagon. So seems a little bit strange, and also that's a rare sighting to see this many news organizations which have very much different political beliefs coming together on this one issue. That really shows you how serious this is, because they usually never agree on anything, like not even an ounce. Can you get those news organizations to agree on a thing? So good for them.
I'd have to say good form, and I'd also have to say this, folks. This was a very dangerous sort of a precedent that was going to be laid out if companies started to agree to this. Only one did. Out of every single news agency that had access to the Pentagon, only a single one actually agreed to this. Every single one of them, rather than that, agreed to this joint statement, which you can see once again is from ABC News, CBS, CNN, Fox News Media, and NBC News. So literally every single major mainstream news organization in America generally shot this down and did not agree to it. This is a bit of an issue, folks, and I'll explain a little bit as to why. Of course, not getting involved in domestic politics, but just speaking about generally the information that's provided to the public. The access to the Pentagon, or the access to the government by the media to gather information, to make news stories, to tell the public about what's going on, whether they're bashing the government or praising the government, is generally a right here in this country. It's not a privilege, much like it's been stated by the Secretary of Defense. The access to the media of key stories from the government, which you, the voters, have voted on these elected representatives to carry forward your wishes, and the press, whether you like them or not, much like us, which generally are considered the press as well, we are the way or the ability for y'all to be able to hear what exactly the government is doing here in the United States of America in terms of foreign policy or in terms of martial affairs like that of war. It is a understood right that the public has a need to know what's going on, as it is the public that voted for the government that's making those decisions. Blocking or restricting the access of any news organizations from covering any stories as they would wish, and sometimes blowing the whistle on things that might not be up to code or accord, is something that starts to violate the very integrity of channels like ours, which reports on stories without U.S. government approval. This is something, by the way, folks, that could end up being quite devastating. Many of you, well, if it was agreed to, many of y'all would know of the story of the My Lai massacre inside of Vietnam, where U.S. forces massacred dozens of Vietnamese civilians because they were paranoid that they were all a part of the Viet Cong, which ended up becoming a significant war crime. That was not approved for release by the United States government, and if it was to be subject to release by the United States government and news organizations had to adhere to that, we would have never heard about that. You would have never heard about a lot of things, good and bad, that have happened inside of the U.S. military if it wasn't for the freedom of the press to be able to have access to these stories without having to run them by the Department of Defense to see if they would like the story to go out or not. I would have to say, folks, this isn't a political thing, but it's incredibly important to what we do here on this channel and the kind of news coverage we give y'all, and the kind of news coverage, for better or for worse, that every other news company out there gives y'all, that First Amendment protections and the freedom of the press has to be respected, because we have to be able to cover the stories in the way that we could. Like, for example, folks, what if the White House wanted to come down, or the Pentagon, say, and tell us, the Enforcer channel, that we couldn't tell y'all about the Venezuelan drug boat that was blown up today off of the coast of Venezuela because they didn't approve that story for release? What if it went that far? Now we aren't even able to tell y'all about what the United States is even doing around the world, because the government is the one telling us what we can and cannot say about them in any way, even in the terms of foreign policy and military actions, which is what we primarily cover. And so regardless of the politics, I'd have to say that that was a fairly good move made by the major news organizations today to make a stand and refuse that sort of a thing, because if that was accepted by everyone, that would most likely start to roll further on down and towards people here on YouTube like us on this channel who cover news like this every day without any approval from the U.S. government.
And also, I see some people saying, "Well, guys are trying to stop leaks. That's why they did that, so it's justified." That's not justified, in my opinion, because what the government's basically telling us right now is they don't trust themselves to properly maintain good OPSEC. So the way the government's going to fix that is, instead of tightening the belt and actually having good OPSEC, they're simply going to kick out the reporters and kick out the media that doesn't want to sign a new pledge to cover their asses in case they don't perform OPSEC properly. That's on the government. If the government can't keep their secrets, that's on them. The government's supposed to implement proper OPSEC regulations to keep things secret that are supposed to remain secret. That's up to them to do that. They can't override the First Amendment because they're lazy and then tell the media, you either have to agree to our rules or you forfeit your First Amendment right. That's not the way it works. The government, that's on them to institute the proper regulations to regulate themselves, not the other way around.
And also, better yet, folks, here's another thing. And I think this is something we can all agree on here. With the Signal Chat leak, many of y'all will know the breakout story from the Atlantic publication about the Signal Chat leak from the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of War, or whatever you like to call him. Wouldn't you like to know about that? You know, to judge the competency of the selected officials that are running the military? Wouldn't y'all like to know about that? Because if it was approved for Department of Defense to sign off on that story going out or not, you don't even get to judge the competency of the people who have actually been selected to run the Department of Defense, or any other government department that's involved in the affairs of war, for that matter. Don't you, as a voting citizen, have a right and an obligation to know about the competency of your elected officials, whether the leak was intentional or unintentional or not? That's something I would say is quite important, because, once again, wouldn't that be bad if no one was able to talk about that, to maybe suggest that some of these people need to be removed from their position, and one day, I don't know, they leak a Signal Chat directly to the Chinese on accident, and nobody knew that this guy had just such a low ability of operational security, he wasn't even able to stop that from happening? I mean, our entire national interest could be jeopardized because no one can even break a story to say that someone isn't really handling classified materials too well.
Yeah. People have to get off Signal. I know Signal's convenient, and obviously it's very convenient to hop on your phone and text people on Signal, but that's not, at least according to what I know, that doesn't sound to be a proper DoD or Department of War approved way to communicate, at least from what I know in the public. So if they need to come up with a way to communicate conveniently that's secure and it's government operated, then go for it. But the answer is not to justify using Signal to communicate classified information. Then you can't just kick the media out of the Pentagon because you want to have convenient communications. That's not the way to do it.
I also saw Dan of New Jersey say, would this channel agree to the agreement? Absolutely not. I wouldn't have agreed to the agreement at all. It was preposterous. To sit there and have a governmental agency telling us what we can and cannot say about that governmental agency itself, that's absolutely absurd. That's like saying, to cover news at all in the United States of America, you have to sign a pledge with the White House that you can't criticize the government. That's literally the Alien and Sedition Acts, if y'all don't know, from way back at the very beginning of the founding of the country under John Adams. That was shot down. Like, I don't know if y'all know about that. Probably a lot of people don't. But at the beginning of the country, there were fairly similar laws that were pushed forward like these, or at least requirements like these, through the Alien and Sedition Acts, which stated that any critical comment about the U.S. government was to be subject to some form of punishment or imprisonment. No joke. That's actually what it said. It was shot down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional because U.S. citizens have a right, whether you like it or not, to say whatever they want about the government, whether they love them, whether they hate them, whether they want them gone, whether they want them to stay for now or forever. You generally have the right to say that all in between, and there really is no one that should be infringing on that right, especially the government itself, in any regard or any measure. But anyways,
Oh, and also, by the way, just to clarify something real quick, in case I misspoke a second ago, Signal is extremely secure. By the way, like I'm not trying to bash Signal or say Signal is not secure. I use Signal personally, and it's very, very secure according to what I know. And also, I've talked to friends that know a little bit more about how it works, and they also say it's very secure. So even though Signal is very secure, though, according to what I know, and I may be wrong on this, but I don't think Signal's approved to transmit classified information over it. I don't think it's approved for that. But I would have to ask around and see if it's been changed recently or not. But I think they're supposed to do different things. Like, for example, go to a skiff if you want to discuss classified information. I don't think you're supposed to send it over messaging apps like Signal, just as a layman.
also, on top of that, I got to say this. There should not be any efforts made to make the conveyance of classified or sensitive information more convenient. The Secretary of War's position is not one of convenience, and he's not a consumer. He's the Secretary of War. And I would expect that someone who goes around always talking about the warfighter this, the warfighter that, they've got to be extremely physically fit, sharp, and competent, would go through at least the additional efforts of following proper procedures in speaking to others about classified materials and information, even if that is more laborious and more time-consuming than a signal chat, whether or not that's approved for classified information conveyance anyway. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have tonight coming out of the United States, we also have been able to hear of a very interesting statement from the U.S. The U.S. ambassador to NATO, Whitaker, has stated some big announcements are expected tomorrow for U.S. weapons to Ukraine under PURL. Sounds like we might be providing them with Tomahawks. We'll have to wait to see what the announcements are tomorrow, but it sounds very promising. Also, we've been able to hear of something absolutely crazy that was unveiled by the Army today, which is the following. The U.S. Army on Tuesday unveiled the Janus program, more than a 6-year effort by the Army and the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit with the goal of developing and constructing hundreds of state-of-the-art small nuclear reactors to power military bases across the United States, according to the Wall Street Journal. The reactors, dubbed micro-reactors by the Army, will generate less than 20 megawatts of electricity, enough to power a small town or base, and will be small enough to be transported either by ship or aircraft to remote military locations overseas, such as islands in the Pacific. Secretary of the Army Daniel P. Driscoll stated that they hope to have the first reactors operational at bases across the country by September of 2028. This is actually pretty cool, I'm not going to lie, folks. And while some people are scared about nuclear technology, I actually think that this is incredibly good for strategic purposes. But what were you about to say, Matthew?
These are, and what bases are these being deployed at? Forward military bases?
Originally, they're going to be putting these at domestic bases and fixed positions, but the plan is to eventually make these deployable to where the nuclear reactors could be transported overseas to islands and bases inside of the Pacific.
Dear Lord. I'm surely I'm not the only one that sees the problem with this, I hope. Like, I'm not the only one that sees, like, maybe deploying miniature nuclear reactors to possibly hostile areas is probably not a good idea. What do you think, Forster? Are you in agreement with that?
I would actually say this is a fairly good idea. Now that sounds a little bit questionable. I'll explain. One, military reactors, especially small-scale reactors like these, are already found inside of U.S. nuclear-powered submarines. And these sorts of nuclear reactors are designed to where if they're ever hit or take any sort of serious damage, it does not turn into a meltdown, and the reactor is able to shut itself off and go inert practically immediately without causing any form of meltdown or any sort of a radioactive incident like a Chernobyl of a sort, or a mini Chernobyl of a sort. So generally, it would be expected that these reactors already have safeguards built in place, a lot like their counterparts in the Navy, to where if any sort of critical damage is caused, it doesn't end up becoming a nuclear incident or a nuclear meltdown as a result. This is incredibly important, by the way, as far as logistics is concerned, because if we were to speak about the normal deployment of U.S. forces in the Pacific, considering that this seems to be what this is geared towards, if we were to talk about normal deployments in the Pacific on islands, say, all of those islands will have to be resupplied by the Navy, by tenders that carry the fuel to them to be able to run their generators. That could take a lot of fuel, a load of fuel, to keep multiple bases on multiple different islands operational 24/7 all the time in a larger war. A nuclear reactor cuts down a lot on the logistical concerns because you just fly it in or you sail it into that island, drop it off, plop it in, set it up to the larger power grid of that facility on that island, and then you're able to operate the entire thing without the need for ships continuously circling back and refueling those bases and their generators to keep them running and operational. So generally, this is a pretty good thing from a strategic standpoint, and especially if it has safeguards built in, like we would expect, to where the reactor would pretty much shut itself off in the event of critical damage, there really isn't a downside to this thing. There's only a good side to it.
Yeah, the only problem I see is if, for example, drone warfare is becoming the main way warfare is conducted these days. So drones are cheap, they're very effective, and also, for example, adversaries like China have drones that are stealth, so you really can't even detect them flying in. So what's to prevent somebody from, launching an attack on this thing right here using a drone or something, and then you have potentially a nuclear meltdown or something like that occur? I see it looks like there's some concrete shielding in the center of this thing. I'm really not sure how it's structured, but I don't know. Like a drone strike seems like that could be a real threat to this. I'm not really sure how well equipped it is to handle that, but seems a little bit strange, a little bit risky.
I would say it's probably going to be the best move we can make for self-sustainment in the Pacific in a prolonged war, rather than working diesel generators. And also, there's a million different factors that are involved that would make sustaining multiple bases using diesel generators or some form of a normal combustion generator incredibly difficult, if not impossible. In most situations, at least consistently. So this might be our best bet. And also, as long as there's a lot of safety protocols built into this thing, which I would assume there are, it should be safe to operate.
I would hope so because, nuclear reactors, like I get the whole nuclear reactors and submarines thing. Like I get that because those are mobile and also you can generally hide them and nobody really knows where they are most of the time. So those are generally safe because of the mobility aspect. But these right here are stationary, it appears like. So once they get put into place, the enemy can do recon, figure out its location, and then try to target the thing, which could be a huge issue. But I would assume that they have some good protections for it. I see some people saying, well, surely the Army already thought about that. I would hope they have, and I would have to assume they did, at least for now, until we see otherwise.
The Army did, Matthew. Do you know how?
How? Did they discuss it over Signal?
Oh, yes. Directed energy
Send me a
weapons.
telegram.
Man, I got a telegram via Western Union from them. But beyond that, directed energy weapons. This nuclear reactor would run every single laser-based air defense system on an island indefinitely. Like you don't even have to refuel this thing. So if you wanted to conduct a drone attack and say you have a Thor air defense battery on an island made up of nothing but laser-based air defense systems, you can deal with a drone swarm pretty quickly and cheaply without even drawing a lot of power from this reactor. And on top of that, you can make sure to keep the island so well defended at that point from the air from any sort of cheaper drone attacks. The only attacks that an enemy could conduct on that facility would be from a conventional air attack with larger scale missiles that couldn't be dealt with by a Thor. But then at that point, you have the Marine Corps or the Navy to count on to use standard missile 2s or 3s or Patriots or any other form of a conventional air defense system to shoot down that conventional attack. So basically, at that point, you've defended the island from everything except for submarine threats attempting to blockade the island itself from resupply of conventional munitions.
Interesting. I'll have to take your word for it.
I think it's a great idea, honestly. I'm fairly optimistic about that one. But moving on from that, speaking of things that some folks are optimistic on and not necessarily optimistic on, a lot of people are continuing to talk about the strike that the United States conducted on another drug boat down near Venezuela today. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so jumping back to Venezuela for a second, we did see the U.S. strike another alleged drone boat right off the Venezuelan coast. So the big question is, why isn't the U.S. attacking Venezuela? Since we have so many military assets in the region, why has the U.S. not attacked yet? Because it looks like they were about to do it, so what's the holdup? 43% said the U.S. is probably making final preparations for some sort of action against Venezuela, while 32% said the U.S. never planned to attack Venezuela in the first place, and 10% said maybe it's some last-minute diplomacy. And based on what we've heard so far, diplomacy's out the window because it looked like Venezuela tried to at least come to some type of agreement with the United States, and it doesn't look like it went anywhere. So diplomacy seems to be out the window. Also, I believe very strongly the U.S. is planning to attack because there's so many assets in the region. Why would we deploy that much stuff militarily unless we were planning to attack? So it must be final preparations. That must be what it is, and I'm with the 43%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that I'm with the 43% as well. I think the United States is making final preparations. We're just waiting for the moment when all of this is going to jump off and go over the top, in a sense, and create a larger war. But moving on from that and out of Venezuela, it's time for us to get to Europe. And we have loads of news to cover in Europe, and not enough time. But we will be making sure to take our time and get through this. So, moving us on into Europe, we were able to hear that Britain has delivered 80,000 drones to Ukraine in 6 months, which is quite impressive. We've also been able to hear that the NATO General Secretary is stating some fairly concerning developments today, stating that he believes if China was to attack Taiwan, it will likely force its partner, Russia, to attack against NATO to distract the alliance and also the United States from fighting in consortium with the Taiwanese to defend themselves against the Chinese invasion, which is a fairly concerning sort of a statement to be heard, echoed now twice by the General Secretary of NATO. Inside of Germany, we also were able to hear that storage levels of natural gas are about 76% full shortly before the onset of winter. That's where it's at right now. And this is historically lower than most years and trends that we've seen prior. So a little bit concerning with that. And it looks like the Germans may be getting dangerously low on fuel supplies by the end of this winter. But we'll have to see how that largely works out for them and what we might be able to do to stymie any sort of further developments in the upcoming years on this lack of supply. The United States of America has also reiterated, at least through retired General Ben Hodges, that the forces at Kaliningrad and Sevastopol would be destroyed within the first hours of a full-scale war between the United States and NATO versus Russia, stating recently on a Polish television network, if Russia attacked Poland in 2025 the way it attacked Ukraine, it would simply be destroyed by NATO's air and ground forces. Kaliningrad would be eliminated in the very first hours. In the very first hours, Kaliningrad would cease to exist. All Russian facilities would be destroyed, any Russian military facility in Sevastopol likewise. Therefore, direct comparisons in this case are inappropriate. And while it is good to have confidence in our abilities, the saying that we would be able to mount a response and destroy them within hours, I'd actually have to say is a little bit too over-optimistic because, one, it takes a couple hours to even get everyone on the same page that something's happening and we need to respond, even inside the U.S. military. So while I would say that it's great to hear, and I would definitely agree with that in the long term, say over a couple of weeks from the beginning of a conflict with Russia, the threat would not be muted and destroyed just within the first few hours alone, from what I would understand. But anyways, moving on from that and on into Belarus, we also were able to hear that the Belarusians have threatened today that there will be a nuclear war if the president transfers Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. So the Belarusians are directly threatening nuclear war, flat-out nuclear war over the Tomahawks. So a little bit interesting with that one. We'll let y'all make that one out to what y'all want, because that one's just absolutely stupid and an extreme sort of a threat and escalation just by the threat on the delivery of Tomahawks. I have a feeling the U.S. is going to give them anyways, and then the Russians are going to have to figure out how to save face and pretend like they were just kidding and only exaggerating on these statements in the meantime. Inside of Moscow, we also heard that the Russian Federation is now switching to the 3-day work week. Y'all heard of the 5-day work week and the 6-day work week. Man, Russia is doing so well, they're switching to the 3-day work week. Talk about all that leisurely time everyone's got in Russia now. They get 4 days off a week. I mean, the Russian economy's got to be doing great. You know, the groceries are cheap, the gas isn't really cheap, but everything else has got to be insanely cheap. And on top of that, they're apparently making all of their pay in just 3 days. They get all 4 days off. They're traveling around the country on vacations. They're getting to go from gas station to gas station and marvel at how all of them are out of gas. But basically, just to run this down for all of y'all, because Anton Gerashenko put out a very large and good analysis on this, in short, the economy is doing so badly in Russia, a lot of these companies aren't even seeing any of the supply that they're producing getting purchased. And also, on top of that, they're hemorrhaging money. And so they don't really have enough money to keep these workers working 5 days a week. So a lot of them are switching down to 4-day work weeks or 3-day work weeks to try and salvage the situation as much as they can and hemorrhage the lesser amount of money that'll lead to them collapsing about the same time they would have anyways at this point. But the Russian economy is pretty much dying at this point. It doesn't really look like there's any chance to recover. We also were able to hear that Dugin, this psycho right here, has stated. He's scary as hell looking, honestly. This guy looks like the stuff of nightmares here. But he stated, for Russia to become Russia again, Novorossiya alone is no longer enough. The whole of Ukraine is needed. The Novorossiya topic is already outdated for us. Now Kyiv is needed. With Kyiv, we exist. Without it, nothing. The longer this thing drags on, the higher the stakes. So Dugin is now saying that they need to take over all of Ukraine. We already knew that. Also, why in the world does it look like he's wearing like some sort of a skin cap up there with fake hair on it? Like, do you see that?
Yeah, I kind of like see something looking weird right there. You know, honestly, this guy right here looks like he's named after that Russian ICBM. He looks like Satan.
Honestly, he kind of does. He reminds me of Rasputin. And if you don't know, Matthew, Rasputin was so hated that some guys back in the day, it was like, I think in 1917, they killed Rasputin in St. Petersburg. And they failed. Like, I'm sure you know the story. They tried to poison him and he was immune to the poison. And then they shot him and he kind of lived a little bit. So then they dumped him in the river and then he kind of lived then. And then they had to go find him and shoot him again. You know, it was a whole deal. But in the midst of it, some guy actually saw that there was a blood streak in front of the palace that they were killing him in. It was from him. He had been shot in the basement and had somehow managed to get up and run outside, and he collapsed in the courtyard at the gate. And so the collaborators that were killing him dragged him back into the palace to figure out what to do with him. And a police captain came up to the palace, walked past the blood trail, knocked on the door, and one of the assassins answered, and they said, "Hey, there's a blood streak out here. What's going on?" They said, "Do you hate Rasputin?" "Well, yeah, I do." "Well, we're inside killing him right now. So for the good of Russia, you won't say anything about this." And the police chief legitimately said, "Man, okay, I got you. Have a great night then." And he turned around and he just walked away. Like, he just walked off and left him alone to do whatever they were doing. This guy is pretty much the modern Rasputin. He's like this, he's like this weird pseudo-science, like, weirdo monk dude. Like, that's the best way I can explain it. Literally just like Rasputin. And pretty much holds the same kind of prominence and position in the Russian government that Rasputin did during the Russian Empire. I have a feeling the guy's probably hated a good bit because the guy is an absolute whack job. But this statement here is making it quite clear that Russia's ambitions were never going to stop at the occupied territories. They still include the entirety of Ukraine, and they're going to keep going until they eventually achieve that. I also see a lot of people talking about, hey, didn't they poison Rasputin first? Yeah, I'll get you all through the story really quickly so the sequence of events is lined up right. They brought Rasputin over to a palace. There were loads of palaces in St. Petersburg at that time, still is. It wasn't the Winter Palace, it was a smaller one inside St. Petersburg. They brought him there, and one of the accomplices brought him into the basement to eat a cake, and the cake was laden with cyanide. So the guy ate the cake, ate loads of it, as a matter of fact, and he just didn't die. And everyone was shocked by that. So the accomplice went upstairs to all of the other accomplices, told them, hey, this guy isn't dying. Like, he's eaten like 3 slices of the cyanide-laced cake, and he's not dying. So they were like, well, damn, what do we do next? They're like, I don't know. Let's just go down there and try and get him to drink this poisoned wine. So they found a poisoned wine, brought it downstairs. It was also laced with cyanide. He drank the wine, did not die. So then they were like, well, what the hell do we do now? And then now they're like, oh my God, we've just got to do something. I mean, the guy's literally loaded with cyanide. So I'm just going to take this revolver and go downstairs and cap him. So the accomplice went back downstairs, capped the guy, I think twice, and then he came back upstairs. He's like, okay, he's got to be dead now. I just shot him twice. There's no way in hell that he's lived. So everyone wandered off to go deal with a car at a train station in St. Petersburg. Turns out the little bastard was still alive. He crawled out of the basement and then went running through the courtyard, dripping blood everywhere, fell down. Then they came back and they're like, oh my God, he's laying in the middle of the courtyard, still alive. They dragged him back in the building. And then that's when the Russian police captain showed up, and they were like, hey, what are you doing? And they were like, we're killing Rasputin. And he was like, all right, have a great day, have fun with that. Then he left. Then I think they shot him a couple of more times there, and then they were like, okay, now we need to take him to the river and dump him in, and that's specifically the Neva River, which goes through St. Petersburg. They went up there, but literally got his body out. There was a couple of bystanders there. They're like, hey, what are you doing? And they were like, oh, we're killing Rasputin. And they were like, oh, sweet. And then they walked off. They dumped him in the river. He somehow lived through that. And then I think they had to club him or something later. And then he eventually finally died. But it was a whole deal. It was a whole ordeal. But that's the actual story of the Rasputin assassination in a very, very short nutshell of how that happened. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can about how the assassination of Rasputin happened. It was a fairly long and drawn-out ordeal. But anyways, moving on from that and into the rest of Russia, we did get to see in the Nizhny Novgorod Oblast a significant substation was hit. According to what we know, they hit the Arzas-Maskaya substation, a 500 kilovolt electrical substation in Lesogorsk in the Nizhny Novgorod Oblast. It was confirmed to be on fire by the firm's satellite, and this is its exact location inside of Russia. So quite significant of a hit, and good to see. We also were able to see further on down in Dagestan that there was a significant car crash, and it does appear that the significant car crash has actually ended in the unfortunate loss of several Russian soldiers. We do not know why the car crashed. Maybe there was some booze involved. That would seem to be fairly likely, knowing the Russian history, but as you can see here, the car's not in good shape, and a couple of them weren't, actually, as a matter of fact. But a very unfortunate situation for the Russians. It's not really like it was going to go any better for them on the front lines, though. We also were able to hear, however, that a lot of people have been talking about the threat that Lukashenko made about nuclear war. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so Lukashenko, or Lukashenko, however you want to say his name, it sort of flips day to day, but he says there will be nuclear war if the U.S. gives Ukraine Tomahawk missiles, and what are your thoughts? 76% said Russia always bluffs like this. 14% said Tomahawks are actually a real Russian red line, and 7% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And let me try to recall here. The Russians and also the Belarusians are all in the same pot, basically, because it's all Putin's domain. So they said the F-16s were a nuclear threat. Well, the F-16s arrived and Russia did nothing. They also claimed that something else was a nuclear threat. I can't recall all the other ones. They've said that about so much stuff. I can't even recall what they've said it about. So to me, it sounds like another bluff. The Tomahawk is obviously not going to be nuclear equipped. It is possible that Tomahawks could be fitted with nuclear arsenal or nuclear munitions of some sort, but the U.S. has made that perfectly clear that's not going to happen. So I think Lukashenko is bluffing on behalf of Putin here, and he's just yapping like usual. So I'm with the 76%. I think it's a bluff. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh yeah, remember it was the tanks from the West and how they used the
the Abrams.
uranium. Yeah, it was the depleted uranium rounds that they used, the APFSDS shells, and they were like, oh, these are a nuclear threat. And, although they're completely inert, I was like, what the hell? Anyways, beyond that, I think they've said that there's been 3 prior things that are a nuclear threat. I would say they're clearly bluffing on this one. Go ahead and send the Tomahawks to Ukraine and watch how they react. They'll do nothing like they normally do, and they'll like it. There's nothing they can practically do about it. And on top of that, this is clearly a bluff. That would be an extremely major escalation to turn this into a nuclear war because they were given a Tomahawk. I mean, that would actually be the most stupid and asinine thing seen so far. But anyways, moving on from that, it's now time for us to get on into Ukraine itself. And, oh, buddy, folks, we got a lot of it. We got a lot of news. First off, we were able to see the combat donkey.
Oh, he's got the helmet and everything.
Man, he's got the helmet and the vest dripped out, iced out.
Poor donkeys.
That donkey.
Oh, look, there's somebody just ripping by on a four-wheeler or something.
The donkey doesn't like Russians. It's like staying away from them. Poor donkey, honestly. But moving on from that, we also got the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours, and oh boy, howdy, folks. It's getting on up there again. And according to Ms. DC, keeper of the records, troop losses, 9,900 in 9 days. 390 drones is the 11th highest loss, tied with September 18th. No APCs, but vehicles are highest since early June. And over the past 24 hours, we've been able to see that 1,200 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 145 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 29 artillery pieces, and 390 drones. All in all, all, it was a pretty damn good day, and quite nice to see the Ukrainians continuing to hold the line and also inflict significant casualties onto the Russians. Inside of Belgorod, we were able to hear that further restrictions have been made on the provisions of gas, as we are now hearing that they have banned pouring gasoline into cans at all gas stations in Belgorod, and you can now only fill up your car, and that is it. We have also seen near to the border at Vovchansk, the Ukrainians targeting and destroying Russian positions that are inside of Russia right across the border near to the Vovchansk front. A lot of civilian vehicles nowadays, folks. Notice that. The Russians have pretty much lost most, if not every, military transport, and now all of them are buhankas or some other form of a civilian car requisitioned for military service. I'm not going to lie, man. I don't know what military museums are going to look like from the Ukraine war. Like, on the Russian side, it's just going to be burned out T-72, Buhanka, Lada, and then some crappy canned drone anti-warfare looking thing, and that's about all the key weaponry they had in the war.
Yeah, honestly, I'd like to snag a Lada for the personal collection, I would say. I would like to snag one of those.
Honestly, man, I think you could finesse a Lada quite nicely, honestly. But moving on down into the Lehman direction, we also got to see them hitting Russian forces down here in the Signum unit. And we see the Russians here with the headlights on. That's a crucial mistake. You're not supposed to do that. And it looks like they got it. We can also see this Buhanka about to get their ticket as well.
Oh, wow, look at him. Look at him.
Oh, he was whipping.
Russian drift. Look at him go. Look at him bounce.
Oh, my God, he's gunning it, and it was for naught. Oh, and there it goes.
Man. What was he wearing? Was he wearing like the Red Bandit mask or something? What the hell? Did you see that mask he's wearing? Look at that.
I don't think that's a mask, man. I think that's just like his face.
How can that be his face? Like, what does he have, third-degree burns?
No, Matthew, he's an alcoholic. Their skin turns red when they get drunk enough.
That's got to be a mask right there. You know that mask that people wore that was like red when they would like get shot out the cannonball thing at the circus or something like that. They wear that red mask or whatever. It looks like that.
You mean the clown makeup?
Not really the makeup, more like a mask.
I don't know what mask you're talking about, actually. I never saw that, but I'd have to say I think the guy just drank a lot, and so his face is fairly red. I think that's what it is. But moving on from that and on down the clips, further on down and towards the area of Yablonivka and Rusin Yar, we were able to see some Russian forces being thwarted within this area by the famous Fighting 93rd. There's a Russian tank, and a couple of more, and a lot more. The 93rd's been churning out Russians and spitting them out quite easily. We also saw, in this clip as well, further on over, the 93rd stopping these Russian forces earlier on in the day. Take a little look at this. You see them.
I could have sworn we saw this one the other day.
Oh, no, we didn't. This is fresh. Fresh.
It blends together. I can't remember its unique, Vinny. I can't remember.
Oh, this is all fresh right here.
Oh, oh, that's fresh right there. That porcupine tank, that's fresh. Oh, that's fresh too. Evil Knievel. I tell you, look at him.
Man, I'm telling you, this is fresh like the bakery right here. Look at this. They're about to hit this one on the side. That one actually had an ERA package. That was actually kind of rare.
I'll tell you what, the Russians are trying to open a new bakery. I hear they're trying to sell baguettes. They're trying to sell a little bit of croissant, but the French, they don't want to play ball. They don't want to give them the license.
Man, I've actually been hearing that the Russians have been getting real heavy in that cooking oil business, just not the food type.
Man, I'll tell you.
I mean, these Russian attacks, folks, they couldn't do any worse. Also, the 93rd has really changed their outro a good bit. Anyways, with that, that's the end of that clip. And moving on from that and further on down and into the area of Shukove, near to the Dobropilia direction, we also got to see some Russians being thwarted out here by the Fighting 93rd as well. You all know it's the Fighting 93rd. And Ed Sefford said, when does the fall mud season start in Ukraine? In a couple of weeks, just about, near to the end of October.
Look, it's like a tank superhighway or something. Highway of death.
It's got like a tank conga line, but it's not a party.
Yeah, something like that.
Man, party in the USA.
Oh, this is party in Ruski Mir.
Oh, the little flight miles there. Oh, and they got a mine rolling tank. Oh, that's nice. That's swell. Oh, and they're getting another one. At noon tomorrow, I'll resign the office of the president. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. But anyways, you can see them continuing to hit the Russian forces. I don't know why, Matthew, but that meme just came right back at me right then. I had to say it. I don't even know why. No context, no nothing.
I am not a crook. I am not a crook.
I would like to... Dude, you know what someone needs to do with the Sora AI? They need to do the whole Watergate resignation speech, but make it in the format of a YouTube apology video. Hello, everyone. I'm the president, and I've messed up. Like, you know, make him do the sigh and everything. Oh, dude, that'd be so funny, honestly.
Nixon was so worried about not being a crook. And now they couldn't care less if they're a crook.
I'm now going to be introducing a brand new merch run, I'm Not a Crook. T-shirts available on the Nixon store, link in the description below. Make sure to hit that like button and that bell button so that way we can wiretap them. You know, that's it. Man, honestly,
if they could have like a little meeting of the minds of the politicians, they could bring Nixon back and have him do that. I'm not a crook. And they could simply tell him, look, dude, it's 21st century now. It's 2025. You don't have to worry about that crook stuff. Chill out. Really? I don't have to worry about being a crook. It's like, no, not really. Apparently not.
Man, I honestly wish, folks, that Nixon could have been alive for the Supreme Court to say as long as the president does anything within his official capacity, it's not a crime. He would have been like, I'm vindicated. Like, he would have been like, I'm free. The media, they treated me so poorly back then, so cruelly, and now I know that I was able to do that. Wiretap him again. Like, hit him in Watergate.
Legalize crime. Legalize crime.
Oh, man. But moving on from that and further down the line and into Pokrovsk, we also get to see them hitting some Russian forces down here. Some towed artillery and the like. Oh, look at these Russians. They're really trying to get at it, but didn't work, did it? No, it didn't. No, it didn't. Oh, hell no.
Oh. Look at them. Look at them. They're burning the forest down. Bring out that Russian bear fella who doesn't like fires.
Have you ever had a Nixon steak?
I didn't know he had those.
Well, we do now. We also have Nixon fragrances. It smells like burning charcoal in Vietnam. Like it's a phenomenal sort of thing. Smells like Hanoi on fire. It's wonderful. But moving on from that and on down the line and into Zaporizhia, we also got to see that Tor systems, what a tongue twister, are starting to fail a little bit more from what we're hearing from the partisans and the Atesh units. A little bit of an interesting sort of an occurrence. These Tors are old as hell. The paint's even faded on them, so we do know that there's a good bit of credence that these things are actually failing down there in fairly larger numbers. So, an interesting point to hear. Oh, by the way, the Russians are actually getting heavy into that cooking oil. We can see that they're starting up that brand new industry inside of Feodosia while they play some sort of song as the ducks swim around in the water, and Feodosia's on fire right across the way.
Thanks video is like a recipe for motion sickness, the way that water's moving and the camera's like bouncing around. It's just like looked up for a second and got vertigo from looking at it.
Man, blood got vertigo. We also got to see the oil depot on fire here as well. It's burning quite nicely still, about a week later. Moving on from that and on out of that area of Crimea, it's now time for us to move on up into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on this very day of the war. They're getting these cinematic thumbnails down. Oh, actually, it's a cinematic video. That's crazy.
They got you that time.
Yeah, so without further ado, here's the speech. Peach!
Шановні українці, українки, коротко про цей день. Детально готуємось до нашої розмови з президентом Трампом. Провів сьогодні нараду з військовими, Міністерством закордонних справ, міністром енергетики, керівником Нафтогазу, також з командою Офісу. Всі аспекти розмови мають бути пропрацьовані так, щоб Україна була дійсно посилена. Ми обговорили з президентом Трампом вже певні речі. Є контррішення, які можуть допомогти. Щодо Петріотів, щодо Томагавків, це дуже важлива ідейкою іншої зброї. Важливо чутливі речі обговорити нам особисто. По телефону все не скажеш. У нас є чітке бачення того, як кроки Америки, кроки Європи, інших наших партнерів, наші кроки тут в Україні можуть наблизити завершення війни. Важливе лідерство Америки, лідерство президента Трампа. Ми плануємо й зустрічі з представниками американських оборонних та енергетичних компаній. Звісно, ключове наше завдання – це ППО та стійкість наших міст та громад, також примус Росії до миру. Зараз в світі є дуже сильний імпульс до миру. Після того, що вдалося досягти домовленостей для Близького Сходу. Це глобальне питання, багато зробив сам президент США, його команди, також були залучені різні лідери. Вони допомагали дуже сильно, і зараз на Близькому Сході є серйозні шанси жити без війни. Це свідчить, що і Росію дійсно можна дотиснути до припинення агресії. Фактично, саме Росія зараз залишається основним джерелом глобальної нестабільності, глобальним джерелом війни. Прикрутити це джерело потрібно. Ми знаємо як. Також окремо доповідав сьогодні міністр закордонних справ України Андрій Сибіга по тих завданнях, які мають бути реалізовані на європейському напрямку. Дипломати Офісу також доповідали по наших оборонних домовленостях з однією з країн. Ми готуємо серйозну новину на наступний тиждень саме з одним з наших партнерів в Європі. Я говорив сьогодні вранці дуже предметно з президентом Фінляндії. Я дякую, що Фінляндія та сам пан президент особисто завжди підтримують нас дуже. Ми говорили про комунікацію з Америкою, скоординували наші позиції, це завжди допомагає. Також ми обговорили спільні можливості тут, в Європі, швидко посилити нашу ППО. Був сьогодні на доповіді керівник Служби безпеки України Василь Малюк. Я дякую службі за сильну роботу на захист України, на протидію російським агентурним мережам. І також була розмова по ситуації у прифронтових громадах та на півдні нашої держави, зокрема в Одесі. Одеса заслуговує на більший захист та більшу підтримку. Це можна зробити у форматі військової адміністрації. Занадто багато безпекових питань в Одесі, занадто довго залишалось без належної відповіді. Всі ефективні рішення будуть ухвалені. Я призначу керівника військової адміністрації найближчим часом. Дякую всім, хто з Україною, дякую кожному, хто захищає нашу державу і додає сили людям. Слава Україні!
And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the second segment of tonight's news, which is where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And it is a very fun time. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell button. It really helps the channel. But beyond that, it is time for us to move on to the second segment of this stream, where we will get to talk to each and every single one of y'all, hopefully. I got to say that tonight's news has been another crazy night of news, and I got to thank you all so much for enjoying this channel. We've had 80,000 views so far in 2 hours on this stream, and a peak viewership of 15,500 people. That's a lot of folks, and that is a lot of people who enjoy the Enforcer for their news. And I got to thank you all so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running by y'all's viewership alone, and also through y'all's support through the super chats, because y'all are the reason why we have the inspiration and also the funds to be able to keep this channel running and to be able to keep the news coming out each and every single day. And of course, we're now going to spend the rest of the time on this show getting to talk to all the folks who, one, make this channel possible, and two, also give us the inspiration and purpose to get on air every day and to continue to cover the news. And so, before we move on into that, however, we will make sure to get to one last question that we have posed to all of y'all about China invading Taiwan and the Russians then attacking NATO as a result. And what are y'all thinking about that? And Matthew, what are they thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that?
So what are the people thinking? The people have voted here in this poll. They call it democracy. And the question says, NATO says if China attacks Taiwan, then Putin will likely attack NATO as a distraction. That's a hell of a distraction. Well, what are your thoughts? 67% said it sounds very likely, while 14% said that sounds very highly unlikely, while 15% said it's plausible, and it's a 50-50 chance. And I would say I'm a little bit on the fence about this one, honestly, because Putin attacking NATO as a distraction, that's a huge, huge cost to Putin. So is the China-Russia relationship that strong? That's a question mark for me. I could see where that would be plausible, but I'm not sure if I would say it's very likely. I would say it's a 50-50 chance, in my opinion. So I'm actually with the 15%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm generally going to be with the 15% as well. Because it sounds like there's a 50-50 chance, there's a possibility, but we also have to remember that Putin could get himself and all of Russia killed in that sort of a situation. And do they really owe that much to China? Probably not. And also, would they want to put themselves in a position like that and jeopardize their whole country for really no gain for themselves and nothing but gain for the Chinese? Most likely not, because they look at the Chinese internally as an adversary still. So I would be more so on the 50-50 side on this one as well. But with that,
I would say honestly, like we've been saying for a while, Putin is likely planning on attacking NATO like on his own accord, but he's not doing it solely to help China. That's not the main motivation, nor is that even really a secondary motivation, in my personal opinion. He would be doing it simply because he's desperate and has no other option to save his regime inside of Russia. So I really just disagree with the way it's framed. Like, I just don't think he's doing it as a distraction on China's behalf. He's doing it solely for himself. And it may coincide, like the timing might coincide with China attacking Taiwan, but it's not cause and effect. That's basically what I'm trying to say here. So I agree with the premise, but I don't agree with the way it was stated.
I would agree with that because I mean, hell, we've been saying that on the channel for a long time. All these things are generally detached. If they happen at the same time, that's really coincidental. But we're most likely expecting that they'll happen whenever each one is ready, regardless of whether something else is going on in the world or not. So I hope that does address that well, at least in our opinions. I think Matthew and me are in agreement on that one. An agreement, folks. Crazy, because usually we have like little debates about what we think. This one we're actually in agreement on. So that's actually quite interesting indeed, as a matter of fact. But it is time for us to move on into the questions themselves. And also, I see that some people have been saying in the chat, and there was something interesting in here. I gotta try and find it. I have to try and find it, folks, because every damn time I want to find them, it's always something, an interesting question. I never can find them. Let's see here. Dang. I can't find it. I gotta tell y'all, folks, it's the weirdest thing. I'll see something in the chat, I'll sit there and put it in my head, okay, so-and-so said this, I gotta scroll back up the chat in a minute to find that because it was very interesting and it would make a good question and a great answer. It'd be something really cool to talk about. And then every single time I scroll back up to find their chat, I cannot find it. Like, I cannot find them. I know who I'm looking for, and then I never see their chat again. And it was such a damn good question. And I was like, that would be a great way to start off this whole thing, is getting into a really good in-depth question like that. And it's gone. I can't find it. I hate to do that, folks.
That's kind of like modern day foreign policy. It's like one minute you think you saw it, and then the next minute you're like, "Oh, where'd it go? Where'd the strategy go? It must have flown away like a bird."
Yeah,
It
man.
wasn't that dull. That thing just flew straight away. It flew off into the wild blue yonder.
Yeah, I hate it because, folks, recently I've started to do that a good bit because recently I've been seeing just questions in the chat, and instead of trying to get to them later, it's just so good. It's like, oh, I want to get to it now. So I'll sit there and try and remember, and then every time I go back, I can't find it. And so I end up sounding like someone who's crazy, like because I'm like, oh, there was a great question. Let me go back, and then I never find it. And also someone said screenshot it. Unfortunately, I can't because of how my setup is. It screenshots both screens, and so like the text on both of them in the screenshot is really, really small, and then it takes a whole bunch of work to even get to read the screenshots. That's a good idea, but unfortunately, I've tried that already before, and it's just next to impossible. But anyways, with that, we are on into the questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our super chats yet again, our first one here goes to Marion Deemer, a channel legend, of course. And Marion puts in a $30 donation, and a huge shout out to you, Marion, for that support yet again and helping to keep our channel on the air. And Marion, longtime channel legend, of course. And she said, thank you for all you both do.
And thank you so much, Marion Deemer, for enjoying what we do and supporting it. It is folks like you who help us to make this channel possible. And we say that every single night. But it truly is the folks who support this channel through their super chats to help Matthew and me to stay on air every day and to make our bread and butter. Y'all help us to be able to pay our bills, keep the lights on, and do this as a full-time job, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, paying attention to the news, and going over with a fine-tooth comb literally every single day. I've got to thank you so much massively, Marion Deemer, for being with us since those first days years ago on this channel. and still being here with us today and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would have never been able to keep things running behind the scenes so we could focus every single day on getting on air and covering this news. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, at least the best that we can. And I hope that the praise and the thanks is well deserved, because you were an old guard and a channel legend. And so with that, humongous thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Philip Lanebull, and Philip puts in a $20 support, and thank you very much, good sir Philip, for that $20 support right there. He said, good work.
Hey, and thank you so much for enjoying our work and saying that's good work. Good work indeed, I'd hope. And I got to thank you massively once again, because folks like you help us to keep that good work going. You help us to be able to eat our $5 Costco chicken. $5 Costco chicken, folks. And in that little bit of mayonnaise and the bread and the salt and pepper that goes on it, you help us to pay for that. And you help us to keep energized as a result. And you help us to keep this thing running as a result of that as well. And I got to thank you incredibly for that. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, where in the world would we get a $5 Costco chicken? Well, we could get it from Costco, but will we have the money? No. And then we have to resort to petty theft. And that's something that the enforcers are greatly detesting. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Steve, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Steve, for that $20 support. And Steve said, we don't want Chinese cooking oil. Look up gutter oil for everybody, LMAO. Steve, I know what that is. I actually saw that stuff right there. There is not a lot of regulations, or either they're not followed that very well in China when it comes to, like, for example, street vendors and things like that. I've seen documentaries that apparently they reuse a lot of the cooking oil way more than they should. That's not supposed to be proper for health reasons. And the gutter oil, geez, like, I'm not sure if we can show any pictures of that or not, but that's pretty tough.
Gutter oil.
Ugh. Oh my gosh. Ow.
Oh, it's nasty. Oh my God. I can't even look at that. That's going to make me sick. But yeah, we don't want their cooking oils, really, like, especially that type. Really from the gutter. It's legitimately pretty much from the gutter, folks. It's disgusting. But anyways, enough of that. China is a first world country, everyone. China is a first world advanced hyperstate. They have buildings that have LEDs on them. I mean, that states it all. They've won the game. Like, they're way ahead of everyone. They'll never be able to beat us. Goodness. I mean, hell. Who in the world could ever beat the Chinese at this point, really, folks? I mean, who could? But,
honestly, though, some people swear by the flavor of that gutter oil. Like, some people swear by the flavor. They say it just gives this nice aromatic flavor to the
umami
food. Like
flavor.
That umami. Yes, that umami flavor. You gotta love that. It gives it that nice street tire flavor, a little bit of rubber, a little bit of exhaust fumes, and maybe some oil and things like that. You gotta admit, it's like a good mechanical taste. Like, just fantastic.
So folks, here's something I gotta say though that I find really funny is that this is a very common thing both in Taiwan and mainland China. Is the gutter oil, which is pretty much recycling well-used cooking oils over and over and over. And then people want to say that no new diseases could come from such a practice as that. It sounds so unsanitary. You would have to assume that new diseases could emerge out of that literal trench soup that they're using to cook food. I'm very sure. Like honestly, man, if I saw a brothy soup in say a place like Wuhan, and someone said, "Excuse me, would you like some bat soup?" I'd be like, "I'm good." I'd be like, "I'm fine, actually. You know what? I've never been better. I feel full. I've been full since I left America. Thank you, and I'm not coming here. And I'm going right home." That's what I'd say.
The bat is. I wonder, because I personally don't do a lot of research into it. It kind of like grosses me out a bit. But is it the bat meat that's a problem, or is it the way it's like stored? Because like some of these like wet markets, they don't really have refrigeration, so the meat just kind of sits out in the room temperature, and obviously that's not good with meat. That leads to bad things and parasites and stuff like that. So I'm not even really sure. Honestly, like the food safety thing is really out of control. Like I wouldn't touch any of that stuff personally.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with y'all. I wouldn't touch anything in China really, like food wise. It's very unsanitary. Well, there is sanitary
Not
food in
not all
China,
of it.
like not yeah.
It's just the street vendor food, like the unregulated street vendor food. There is like now all China food is not bad. Like I'm not gonna like go all out on them like that, but the street vendors don't really get regulated that much.
Yeah, I mean, but generally though, I was speaking about the street food, like just speaking on that. I wouldn't eat none of it. Now there is good Chinese food, like like every other country on earth. There's always going to be good food, but I sure as hell wouldn't eat street food from China. You're begging to get something at that point. That's like eating street food in India. You're begging to get a disease at that point, so it's just best to avoid that and try and eat somewhere that's not a street vendor. That is not really a good move. But beyond that, I'd also have to say another thing to tell you all about that probably would be quite interesting to y'all is the whole situation with the I'm trying to find something in the live chat, folks, again. I was trying to get it and then read it so that we could go, oh yeah, by the way, oh my god. Why in the world do they never I can never find it. I can never find it ever. It's driving me crazy. It was so good. It was a good point. Anyways, I'm sorry, folks. I'm gonna stop doing that. Either I'm grabbing it out of the live chat immediately when I see it, or we're just not, because I can never find them when I go back and look for them. Anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that the best we can about the whole cooking oil thing and the gutter oil deal and all that. Also, oh, by the way, this is what I was actually wanting to bring up. China also has this thing called fried water. And also fried ice and fried rocks. I don't really know what the appeal of that is, because
I thought it was sauteed.
there is sauteed rocks, but they also have fried rocks as well.
Yeah, like I don't know how much it costs. Like, is it cheaper than other stuff, or is it like not? Obviously, it's not really providing any nutritional value because you can't eat the rock, so you're just getting like the taste off the rock. And it's like, also, are these rocks washed? Are these organic rocks? Like, what are
Are
we
these
talking about?
rocks washed? Like, bro, that is the silliest question to ask, bro. And it's a real question. Are these rocks washed? Like, it's like probably not. Like, I would assume not. Dude, what if you
It's
were
like it's like how can they wash the rocks? It's like there's not anywhere to really wash the rocks on the street. So it's like when someone hands back in a bowl of these rocks that they've been like chewing or eating or something like that. It's like, are they like re-sauteing the rocks and then handing it back out to somebody new? It's like, is Buddy like chewing on a sucked on rock that another person's got done messing with over here? It's like, this is
Oh,
nasty.
someone said if Vera said rocks is in rocks. Hell yeah! Look, this is stir fried rocks. You can get these in China.
Like, why not just like have like meat?
That's my question. What the hell's the point of these?
It says suckable stir-fried pebbles. Yeah, I'm not gonna buy that.
That sounds like
Oh
something Hot Dog
man.
Man.
He said, "Oh man, can I get an express ticket to the suckable rocks, please?"
All these rocks are so suckable. Like, but also here's the deep fried rocks. Oh, that's
That
raw
does look
cod.
dangerous.
Sorry, that's
I
raw.
was about to say, man, I was about to say, who the hell is like putting batter on rocks? This seems dangerous as hell.
But yeah, stir-fried rocks. You can get these in China. They also have, I think, fried ice, if I'm not mistaken. Fried ice.
How do you fry ice?
I don't even know, but I saw them do
How
it.
fresh fried ice?
Yeah, I was like, that wasn't the result I was looking for. But yeah, this is a real deal in China. If you also, oh, I finally remembered what it was. Someone was like, America isn't that far behind China. Unfortunately, I don't know whom the world said that anymore. I'm so sorry I forgot who you were. But I'd agree with you. We aren't. Because something I was looking at the other day, folks? The tallest buildings in U.S. If we look at this, because a lot of people always go, oh, America's just fallen behind. Where in the world are the Empire State Buildings? And where in the world are all the big buildings? We don't build big anymore. Oh, boo. And then we looked at this the other day, and I just realized this, Matthew. Every single one of these buildings in the top 10, save for 2, have all been built in the late 2010s and the 2020s for the large part.
Interesting.
One World Trade Center, Central Park Tower, this is the second tallest building in America right now. Willis Tower, that was 1974. Then you have 111 West 57th Street, New York City. That's the fourth largest one. One Vanderbilt, 2020. That's the fifth largest. All of these folks were built in the late 2010s and the 2020s. And it's a little bit crazy, folks, because everybody makes it sound like America's just completely stopped doing everything everywhere in America, and we just don't do anything anymore. And out of the top 10 tallest buildings in America, 8 of them have been built in just the past 15 years. It's like how in the hell can people say, I'll be honest with y'all folks, the whole deal about America's fallen behind is straight up propaganda, because it's absolutely stupid. Like, if you look at any major projects we're working on right now, there are loads of them in America, endless amounts of them, and nobody talks about them. Everyone just buries them. And then the Chinese, because they don't bury their shit, they'll show you their corncob high-speed rail bridge made out of corn cobs and styrofoam, and then everyone says that they've made it far and that they've beat us in the game. And it's like, really not, because that bridge is going to collapse in about a year. And two, that the only reason you know about it is because the Chinese are putting it out there hard on TikTok and elsewhere, trying to kid you into thinking that America's doing nothing while while they're doing all kinds of deals. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous, really, when you think about that. Like, the public is just lied to, like, endlessly, folks. Like they sit there and say, we don't do anything great anymore. It's like, well, what about the second tallest building in America, which was built just 5 years ago? What about that? I mean, that building is 1,550 feet tall. It's taller than the Willis Tower, which was the tallest building in America until One World Trade Center. It's like, come on. It's like, come on, Jack, this is unreal. Like, it's getting me angry. But anyways, with that.
You were going off on this. You're speeding up and getting faster with the talking and everything, getting wound up over this building talk.
I'm about to turn into Ben. I'm gonna go, there needs to be no retirement age. Like, people need to work to death. Thanks. Like, bro. Like, oh, man. Oh, geez, man. Oh, we're killing ourselves here. We're killing ourselves. But anyways, with that, I hope I addressed that point well, because that was the one I was actually trying to get to a little while ago. But anyways, let's see. Someone said, why do you think so many people talk about the country falling into a ditch and falling apart? Because it's easy to capitalize on that. Like, if you tell everyone the country's falling apart, that's going to get a lot more people to come out to vote than anything else. Like, if you told them that America is doing great things and we could do even better, everyone's going to just ignore you, because they want to think that they're in the midst of the whole country collapsing every day. The doomsday stuff is big in this country, and it's so annoying, because we have so many good things going on, and we have things to improve on, sure. But we have so many good things going on that we could count our blessings and just work on whatever's wrong in the meantime. But everyone's got to make everything into an end of the world scenario. It's the apocalypse. It's doomsday. The whole country's done. It's falling apart. It's bound to collapse every day, every single day, and it never ends. Never ends. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Nathan Beimel, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Nathan, for that very generous $50 support. And that is the second 50 that we got of the night. We appreciate that very much. And Nathan said, I dig the channel, fellas, and I've been binge watching y'all for months, and great stuff.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible for months and years and years. And I gotta thank you incredibly for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And so with that, a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Exploited, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support. He said, dudes, I know you must take time off for yourselves, but man, there's nothing to watch on Monday nights without you guys.
Man, I mean, honestly, I've heard that a lot recently. A lot of people say we're like Chick-fil-A and how they're closed on Sundays, but we're closed on Mondays. And I hope that the video, actually, I don't think we put out a video yesterday. I put one out on Sunday. But unfortunately, we didn't put out a video yesterday to hold some of y'all over, so I'm very sorry about that. There wasn't enough news in the middle of the day for us to make one. But I do thank you incredibly so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. We wouldn't be able to be here right now. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Military Cyborg, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Cyborg, as well, for that $20 support. And you said LSA, love Ukraine, and love y'all from a U.S. veteran. And also, thank you for your service, by the way. He said, pull one from the chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for your service. It's something else to be in the service, especially nowadays. And I got to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep running, because it is folks like you who have helped to make this thing possible and help us to continue to make this thing possible, and also to make it a reality for us to throw one into the live chat. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
And the live chat question goes to Skeleton, who said, any news on why the military took over in Madagascar? And according to reports, the president fled.
I really don't know a lot about it. I just know that there was a armed coup that happened in Madagascar, and that was the end result. But I don't really know a lot of why any of that happened. And generally, with a lot of countries that usually have unstable governments like this, there really isn't any explanation. Rather than some other guy who was in the military wanted his turn at the computer, or AKA running the country, so they just overthrew the current guy, and now he's going to take charge for a while until he gets overthrown. So, don't really know a lot of the details behind it, at least at the moment. And I don't really think we'll get a lot of clear details as to the exact motives as to why that happened either. But still, a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you for sponsoring that live chat as well. And so with that, also, Miss Deesa said, when are y'all moving? And that's a great question. We are going to be moving Enforcer HQ 3.0. I got to bring this up because we have to bring this up. This is a union requirement, folks. We are going to be moving Enforcer HQ 3.0 from the 27th of October to the 31st of October. So pretty much the very end of the month. We are going to be completely off air, and I got to make sure to start putting this out now, folks, because if we don't, we're going to keep forgetting, and we're not going to tell y'all. The channel is going to be entirely down during that period from the 27th to the 31st. We are hoping to keep it at that rate, as minimal as possible, and not add any additional days to it. And if everything is working properly, there should be no additional days added to that time frame. It should be, well, the show should be up and running again by the 1st of November. That's at least what we're assuming right now. So I want to make sure to remind everyone again here on the channel that from the 27th of October all the way up to the 31st of October, we are not going to be running any streams or any videos, because we are going to be in the midst of taking the whole HQ and moving it cross-country all the way out to Salt Lake City. As far as the exact route we're taking, we can't get into any of that information. That's operational security stuff. Unfortunately, I would love to let y'all know that the enforcers were passing through if you're in between here in Utah, but we really can't let y'all know that because there's also a lot of crazy people out there, and then they would also know too. So I hope that gives that sort of a tentative time window, at least at the moment, so everyone can prepare to maybe watch Enforcer reruns or to watch short war videos that we made before. But generally, reruns are going to be the big thing, the craze during that period, because we just won't be able to make anything new, even if something crazy is going on, because we have to get to Salt Lake City and set up the new HQ ASAP. So I hope that
Man, and I'd have put in my vehicle while we're heading out there, I'd have put like the phone there and just do like a live stream of just me yapping in the car driving out there. That's gonna be a lot of time in the car. Like that's gonna be a lot of time. That's a long drive from here to Salt Lake City. Also, by the way, I'm joking. We couldn't do that even if I wanted to, because we have spots, really sketchy connection through the areas we're driving through and stuff like that. We're going out obviously through the middle of the country to get to Salt Lake, so it's going to be a tough one to be able to do something like that. So we will be back though on that Saturday. If there is news enough for a video, we'll definitely have a video out on Saturday. I'll probably be the one putting that out because the Enforcer probably won't have it set up ready to go by that point. But we will have my setup, because my setup's mobile, so I will be able to do that. So we'll probably have a video out that day, definitely. So it's not going to be that far off there. It's only really like 3 or 4 days off the air in reality, if you don't count Monday, which we're always off on Monday anyway. So it's really not that bad, really.
Yeah, it won't be too bad. I mean, it's not the end of the world. And also, we've been off air for long periods of time before this. Sometimes, well, most of the time, actually, it actually was not by will. It was either because I was deathly ill with the plague, because we can't say the real deal on YouTube still. That was one time that we were off air for a really good bit. And then another time was when we set up Enforcer HQ 2.0. So this is going to be something that a lot of the old guards have definitely seen at least twice before. For some people, this might be new, but it rarely ever happens, folks. Breaks in coverage like this, especially from this channel, unheard of. We pride ourselves, actually, we personally pride ourselves here on the show of running this thing like a reliable train or a bus service or a plane service where it is going every single day, same time, same consistency. So it really hurts us a lot mentally to know that we're going to be off air for that long. Because one, we love being on here, and two, we also know that a lot of y'all count on us to tell y'all the news, and that's something we don't take lightly. Some people take that really lightly. I don't know how, but whenever people are counting on us for something, and especially hundreds of thousands of people, I mean, we're going to deliver, hell or high water, or we're going to be freaking out if we can't deliver. So with that, I hope that addresses that well. And also, I saw some people were, let's see here, talking about Salt Lake City. Saw a couple of people in the chat. And one thing that I got to say that's really interesting, folks, about Salt Lake City, another interesting thing that I've learned recently about Salt Lake City is that there is this place, this magical place up here near Promontory. Actually, it's near to Kareen. And let's see here. Where the hell is it? Where is it? Here we are. Oh, here it is. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. It's over here. This place, right here. I saw this on a Navy photo gallery recently. Let me go pull that up. The U.S. Navy photo gallery. Because I was looking at some stuff, and I was very interested in this stuff. And I was like, oh. I was like, what do you know? I was like, that is very interesting. And let me see if I can find this here really quickly, because it was recent. It was recent. That I can say. And dang, everything I say is recent or can easily be found. It cannot be found. I don't know why it's now missing. It was on here. It was literally on the main page, and I've scrolled through 5 pages now, and I cannot find it. But it was actually a picture from this rocket garden of a test that was conducted for a naval rocket motor, and it was a really cool picture. It looked so cool. Let me go to the U.S. Marines photo gallery. Maybe it's in theirs in a easier spot to find. So, no, we don't want that photo gallery. We want the one that they have on their website, U.S. Marines photo gallery. Here we go. And shut that down, and then let's go explore the photos. And it's not on here either. Dang, that sucks. I'll show it to y'all here anyways. This is the rocket garden, and this is where they test rockets. And it's really cool because they have these little hidey holes out here, if I can find one, where they'll place the rockets and they test the motors. It's kind of like Stennis for NASA, but this is private for Northrop Grumman. And what was really interesting about this, I just learned about what its true purpose was the other day, is that right here, about around this spot, right in this area, right here, was once the town of Dead Man's Gulch, or Blue Creek as it was actually called, which is a place of Wild West myth and legend. But it actually was right there, and you can actually see the old railroad fill right here that would have gone over Blue Creek and then started on its way up towards the Promontory Summit, which is where they had the Golden Spike ceremony and everything. So these two places, this one place is one interesting because of the Northrop Grumman rocket testing facility here, and two, it's also incredibly interesting because on this facility is the remnants of Dead Man's Gulch, which is just really cool to know that both of those things are here in one spot. But anyways, that was something.
Honestly, every time I go to Rocket Garden, I always order the fettuccine every single time, personally. But also, by the way, not to jump out of the rabbit hole too abruptly, but Lord Cog is about to get off for the night, so I want to go ahead and grab his super chat real quick because he's about to leave. Lord Cog put in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Lord Cog, for that support. And he stuck around just to hear his super chat read off. And thank you for sticking around, Lord Cog. He said, "Has the power of the U.S. government?" Let's see here. Let's see. I think we can actually address this one, maybe, possibly, but I'll read it off anyway. Lord Cog said, "Has the power of the U.S. government become so centralized in the executive branch as it is now in the modern day?"
That is a good question, and the answer is no. Actually, it really hasn't been. And this is something that's been an endless debate since the dawn of time in this country, is how much authority should the president really have? And the answer usually has always been mixed, as, of course, as usual throughout most of American history. But this is about the most consolidated the presidential authority has ever gotten. And there are a couple of outliers that really consolidated presidential authority. And I would say that the only other time that executive authority has been this large, if it could even be argued, and I think it could quite easily, would be the period of FDR. FDR heavily focalized the power within the executive. And that's actually something that they say was the reason why he won 4 elections. It wasn't necessarily because he was wildly popular. It's kind of because at some point along the way, some of the elections might have started to get a little bit fibbed here and there. Many of y'all will know about the Battle of Athens, which is a small extension of that sort of an issue, but at some point, the votes just started to be counted a certain way, and he just kind of won over and over until he dropped dead of a heart attack in 1944, and Truman took over his place. And that's also why we have the amendment that says that presidents can only serve 2 terms maximum, because then we found out, because of FDR, that if you keep one around for longer than 2 terms, they just start to try and consolidate power and pretty much run it as a presidential republic, where the president holds all the power and every other branch is pretty much just subordinate to them. If y'all want an idea of how consolidated FDR started to make his powers, this is what he did. At one point in his first term, the Supreme Court actually shot down something that he did. So as a result of that, FDR just threatened the Supreme Court that if they don't rule in his favor every way, well, in every situation from that point on, he's just going to pack the court and start adding more Supreme Court justices just so that way he'll eventually get his way. And so then the Supreme Court pretty much just backed off and let him have free reign at that point because they were scared that because the House and the Senate were also controlled by his party at the time, they were just going to start packing the courts. So generally, you could say that during that period, executive authority was probably about as strong as it is right now. But really, in every other period before this, it's never been this strong. And maybe the only other time that you could see that executive authority was this strong would have been during the time of Abraham Lincoln, but that was because of exigent circumstances such as the Civil War, which required emergency wartime powers, which obviously there's going to be a strong consolidation of power during that period, but generally you don't really see it through most other historical periods. Although I do have to throw this out there because this is something that, let's see, Alien and Sedition Acts. This is something that some people don't know about, crazily enough. I thought a lot of people knew about these, but apparently, not a lot of people did. That was a little pop-up right there telling us the government shut down. Beyond that, I need to show you all this one. Let's see, an act respecting alien enemies. Here we are.
We just accept that the government shuts down. Like, how the hell does the government shut down? Just like it's funded by our tax dollars. When you really think about the silliness of that, the government, funded by the taxpayer, the citizens, the government's supposed to serve the citizens, just shut down while we're still paying taxes. I mean, if you really think about that, that's insane. That's even a thing.
It really is insane, honestly. It's actually stupid, I'll say. But and also, by the way, folks, the government shutdowns are actually not common either. This is a modern recourse of the modern political scene since about 1980 onwards, and there's only been 9 of them in U.S. history, all of them since 1980. And the longest ones, well, most of them usually didn't last longer than 5 days, and I think only 2 or 3 of them have lasted any longer than 2 weeks. So, just food for thought. But here is a law from the 5th Congress of the United States at the second session begun and held at the city of Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania on Monday, the 13th of November, 1797. So this is 1797. So let me read to y'all what this said, and let me make sure, let's see, we get to section 2. Here's the part that was important for everyone. And it be farther enacted that if any person shall write, print, utter, or publish, or shall cause or procure to be written, printed, uttered, or published, or shall knowingly and unwillingly assist or aid in writing, printing, uttering, or publishing any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States, or either House of the Congress of the United States, or the President of the United States, with the intent to defame the said government, or either House of said Congress, or the said President, or to bring them, or either of them, into contempt or disrepute, or to excite against them, or excite or any of them the hatred of the good people of the United States, or to stir up sedition within the United States, or to excite any unlawful combinations therein, for opposing or resisting any law of the United States, or any act of the President of the United States done in pursuance of any such law, or of the powers in him vested by the Constitution of the United States, or to resist, oppose, or defeat any such law or act, or to aid, encourage, or abet any hostile designs of any foreign nation against the United States, their people, or government, then such person, being therefore convicted before any court of the United States having jurisdiction thereof, shall be punished by a fine not exceeding $2,000, which is quite a lot by 1797's figures, and by imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. So this act right here, which is one of the acts of the Alien and Sedition Acts, actually made it a crime to criticize the government in any way. That's what that did. Section 2 of this act made that the case. The Supreme Court shot it down because they said that that was a complete violation of the First Amendment and the freedom of the press, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, and so on, which was one of the key earliest Supreme Court rulings that was ever made, because this only happened 10 years after the Constitutional Convention of 1787. So the U.S. Constitution had only existed for 10 years. And also Enforcer Matt said, sounded like gibberish. It did. Like, this thing is written like crap, honestly. And what's even
Did
crazy...
they write that? Did they sound like they wrote that to be deliberately vague? Like it sounded, it was just like a garble of words. It's like they could have simplified that down a lot. It's like, it sounds like they did that on purpose, though.
Oh yeah, they did that on purpose because it was supposed to be ambiguous enough that John Adams, who was the president at the time, could just target literally anyone by saying that they violated this act and then have them imprisoned. So pretty much, in a sense, this is something of a similar thing, like not getting political, but this is pretty much what the case is. This is a similar thing. Well, this is directly what is being kind of attempted right now to some degree. So this is something that was shot down by the Supreme Court outright. It was a complete violation of the First Amendment. And this also was something that fueled a lot of people at the time, which was in the opposite party, which were the Anti-Federalists, which were still around during this period. Generally, the two parties that existed in early American history were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, especially in this very early period of American history. And the Anti-Federalists, which were led by Thomas Jefferson at the time, he would end up becoming the third president of the United States, they used this act after it was shot down by the Supreme Court to say, look at it, when you give a federal government pretty much supreme power over the United States, they're obviously going to become tyrannical, and they're going to start trying to crush people's rights. Thank God we had the Bill of Rights, and the Anti-Federalists supported that sort of an idea. Otherwise, this most likely would have just been passed on by, and there would have been literally no constitutional protections on the abridgment of free speech that were codified into the Bill of Rights as law to be protected from then on. So that's something that I would have to say, like where we're at right now is actually nothing entirely new. This has been done before, henceforth this example here, 10 years into the Republic, not the Confederation, that was attempted, and it was shot down. And of course FDR and many others are examples as well of heavy consolidations of executive authority and power. It's something, though, to be very careful about, because a lot of people, when they like a guy, they let him get away with a lot. And that's not to say I dislike the person who's in question right now or not. We stay apolitical on the channel. But one thing that's fairly important to remember, folks, is that you always have to walk a fine line between liking someone enough that you want to vote for them and then liking them so much that you pretty much let them do what they want. Because you have to remember that at the end of the day, the people who run this country aren't the White House or the Congress. The people who run this country are the very citizens themselves that vote those people into office. And for that reason, those people have to be held accountable right alongside their peers in the citizenry, and they're not above the citizenry. So I hope that answers the question at least the best I can from my knowledge and opinion on that, because that's something always important to remember, is that our general elected officials, while they are our leaders when they are elected, they still stand at the same level of scrutiny and at the same level side by side with other citizenry. All men are equal in this country. All citizenry are equal by extent in that country. And so for that reason, they should be subject to the same scrutiny as any Tom, Dick, and Harry out on the street. But anyways, with that...
Actually not. Actually not. And in July in 2024, that's last year, the Supreme Court actually said no to that.
Well, I would say that ought to be overruled, like, eventually. But, you know, that's just my 2 cents on it, folks. That's my 2 cents. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Glock, who's there? LSA. And thank you very much, good sir, for that $20 support, and we do appreciate that.
Hey!
He said the civil war is starting in Gaza, and just as soon as Israel pulls out, will full-scale civil war break out? And what say you, brothers and LSA? Honestly, Mr. Glock, I would say that we're already seeing different factions start fighting it out inside of Gaza. I kind of saw that coming to a certain degree because Hamas, while it may have been the primary terrorist force that was in Gaza at the time, there's other ones that are there. So when Hamas decided to back down, that could have been the green light for these other factions to say, oh, look, Hamas is weak. Let's go in there and take Hamas out, and now we'll take charge, and then this new terror group will be in charge of Gaza. So I think that'll probably happen. I think you're right with that. Hamas has been perceived as weak now by the other terror groups, and they're probably going to pounce, and civil war probably will break out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that there's definitely going to be a great deal of instability. We're already seeing that, like you're saying, Glock, who's there, and I think that's going to go on for quite a while. There's probably going to be an endless myriad of different factions inside of Gaza, a lot like there was inside of Syria, supported by different groups for different purposes and different reasons. And I have a feeling it's going to remain highly unstable for a long period of time. But I do thank you for the support, and I hope that has addressed that the best I can, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, I see somebody getting legalese on me here, which they are actually correct, by the way. Someone said the president only has immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts, according to the Supreme Court. And that is true. But the problem is official acts is very broad. And also that's subject to interpretation. So if a president does something in an official act as the U.S. president that turns out to be illegal, technically, according to the Supreme Court, he can't be prosecuted for that. He gets a free get out of jail free card. In fact, he gets a free get out of court card as well. He never even has to get put in court by a prosecution. So technically, yeah. Technically, according to the Supreme Court ruling, anything unofficial or a private act by a president is still able to be prosecuted. But we'll have to see if it actually works out that way. I have a feeling that it won't work out that way, and they'll probably try to say everything done by any president is an official act to avoid prosecution. That's my guess, and that's not unique to one president. That'll probably be unique to all the presidents, not just one, in my personal opinion.
Well, also, you have to remember, as far as the actual mechanisms of that work, for a president to be prosecuted for any purpose, they would have to be prosecuted by the attorney general.
Yeah, that's true. Although this is technically referring to when a president leaves office, because obviously the president's not going to get prosecuted while they're in office. They control the executive, which controls the DOJ. So they're not going to get prosecuted then. But if a president gets to the end of their term, then they leave the office, then they become a private citizen again. That's when these retaliation prosecutions usually take place. And this is what that Supreme Court case is trying to address. But the problem is, though, it's so broad, it seems like it basically gives a free pass, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, pretty much. And also there's a whole to be honest with y'all folks, there really isn't a lot of accountability once you get up to the highest levels of the government at the Congress, the executive, and the Supreme Court. There really isn't a lot of accountability at that point because for the president to be held accountable, the Congress has to hold him accountable. Will they do that? Probably not. For the president to be accountable, there's also the attorney general, but will they? Most likely not. Can the Supreme Court actively go out of their way to hold anyone accountable? They can't. They're not designed to be able to do that. So the reality is that that's why, like to some extent, that's actually why there's a good bit of corruption up there, is because nobody's willing to go after anyone else who's involved in it for the larger part. So that's, if you're ever wondering the answer as to why that's the case, that kind of is the answer. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Blind Man, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that $20 support. He said, good luck in Utah, enforcers. And last time I was in Utah, an armored car forgot to latch their back door and dumped approximately $200 million onto the interstate on accident, causing a 1.5-hour traffic jam as people swarmed the streets. That sounds like a hell of an event. How's an armored car carry $200 million, by the way? That must be a big armored car. Or unless I just don't know what $200 million looks like in physical form, but that seems like a lot of money to fit in the back of an armored car. That's wild. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's crazy. I mean, Salt Lake City is so prosperous, it's raining money. Like, it's falling out of the back of trucks. Like, wow.
And they're like, what do we do with this money? Just dump it on the street.
Man, man, Salt Lake City, they're so wealthy, they're wasteful. They just pour out 200 million on the street and just don't even think anything of it. It's just another Tuesday. Honestly though, I mean, like if I was out there, oh man, I would not touch that money, folks, because they'll get you. Like they'll get you for that. So I wouldn't have touched it at all. Especially if they caught you on the scene grabbing the money. So that's I wouldn't have touched that myself, but that is actually pretty crazy to hear, nonetheless. And also, I got to say, Salt Lake City. I have great hopes for Salt Lake City, folks. It looks like a really cool place. It looks like it's got a lot going on, and also, it's crazily enough, cheaper than Alabama, which is really the craziest part of it all, is that it's cheaper, and that's something you just wouldn't believe. And I wish we could get down into the figures and stuff about how it's cheaper, but crazily enough, folks, it costs us the more money to live in Alabama than it does in Utah with how it's broken down. Like it's really weird that way. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Slamina Evil, who puts in a 14. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for supporting the channel. And he said, sup, lads, and sup to you. He said, to be honest, it's in my opinion that nations, armies, active or reserve, should rotate to guard prisons in practice for POWs, like in the World Wars. And what's y'all's thoughts and pros and cons?
I would generally say in the United States that just really wouldn't work because a lot of prisons are correctional facilities that are operated by state governments. So at that point, you're pretty much federalizing the entire prison system because their management is being given to a federal entity. And
They're
for
already
that,
federal.
hmm?
The Federal Bureau of Prisons is what controls the prisons.
Well, yeah, but the states also operate their own prisons, like the state of Alabama, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's state prisons, but there's I think he's referring to federal prisons.
I think he's speaking about prisons in general.
Possibly, maybe, but the federal military though wouldn't have any right to go into the state prison. Like they could go into the federal prison, but they couldn't go into the state one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that's why I was like, I don't know about that because if you're doing that for all of the prisons, like how many correctional officers, uh, let's see, number in the U.S. in general. What do we get? So about 361,000 across the whole of the United States. And I guess that's state and federal combined. So it's not really a large number. And considering that if we combine the active, the reserve, and the National Guard and everyone else in between, there would be several million service members who could end up being rotated into these facilities. And even get any of them some level of experience, if we're speaking about, federal, like getting enough of them into the prison system to do that, you would have to have pretty much all of the state prison systems federalized at that point to be able to have the room for experience. So I would say probably not the greatest. And on top of that, another thing as well is that state prisons, or even federal prisons for that matter, they don't really get close to the whole prisoner of war thing because those people are criminals. They're going to shiv each other. And you usually wouldn't see in most prisoner of war situations that prisoners of war are going to be shanking each other, for like a bag of coffee or, something like that, or anything crazy like that. You generally wouldn't see that. So I don't really know if it would be good experience for them. And honestly, at that point, I think that experience would be fine just getting on the job training because most prisoners of war are generally not violent or unpredictable or crazy for that matter. And there's also really no risk in guarding them. The only danger there is that they might attempt an escape at some point. And then at that point, you just track them down and then bring them back. And that's about it. So I would say I wouldn't really want to do that. And also on top of that, I don't really like the idea because this is something that's starting to become really mainstream in the modern days, just use the military for everything. And back in the day when I was younger, I actually thought that was a fine idea, just bringing the military to do stuff here and there and everywhere. But nowadays, I think it's a lot better to ensure that the military only sticks to its specific duties, which is the carrying out of war itself and the defense of the nation, rather than to get involved in domestic affairs like guarding prisons and such things, because we start to overlap that at the point to where the military apparatus is starting to become an incredibly powerful one, because at that point, where do we move from there? Like, if the military is also called out into the streets to conduct policing, I mean, hell, the executive branch of Washington, D.C. is pretty much running the law, the crime and punishment side of things at that point nationwide, which is pretty much completely stripping the states of any authority to police their own states, to hold accountable the people who have committed crimes in their states. It's pretty much being completely federalized at that point, and I would say that probably isn't too good of an idea and far outweighs the benefits with the side effects, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you for the
You
support.
know, fun fact, in the United States, the U.S. prison population is 1.25 million people in prisons at any given time. So that's quite a lot of people in prison. Also, by the way, another fun fact, the United States incarcerates people at a rate 5 times greater than Mexico. Quite interesting. The incarceration rate per 100,000 of the national U.S. population is 655, and that same incarceration rate in Mexico is 165. So you can see the huge difference there between the two. By far, the United States imprisons people way, way, way more than any country on earth. The closest competitor is Turkey, and they're at 287, and the U.S. is at 655. So we really do imprison people quite a bit in the United States, a lot.
I mean, honestly, that's crazy. That's actually insane. 1.2 million people in prison. I mean, that's unreal.
Yeah, that's insane, really. Part of me wants to say it's because we're overregulated and there's so many things that become federal crimes and so many things that are criminalized now that probably shouldn't be. That's probably why, and maybe we have a better prosecution system. Maybe I'm not really sure though. But typically it's not a good thing to have a large prison population.
Yeah, generally it's not. I mean, on the other hand, though, China just kind of executes everyone. That's why their incarceration numbers are so low, is that most crimes in China are just the death penalty by injection or shooting. So that's generally why their incarceration rate probably looks fairly low, because the amount of death penalties they give out and then execute are large, massive every single year. I think it's like over 10,000 most times every year. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that. Mhm.
Also, this is a statistic just 3 years ago. This is a 3-year-old statistic. The U.S. and this number's gone up, by the way. The U.S. has nearly 25% of the world's prisoners. So, out of all the world's prisoners, which is like 11 million people in prison worldwide, 25% are in the United States alone. So that's crazy.
Huh. That is wild. Um, I think we also own most of the guns in the world. Man, America's number one, baby. What? Like, man, honestly, probably not the greatest things to be in number one for, but that's still interesting. But anyways, it is time for us to move on to the next one, folks.
And our next one here goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Robert, for that 10. He said, "Great work. It got me through the night."
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting and enjoying our work. And I'm glad to know that it's helping you through the night. And so, humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And so, with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Luke UK. And thank you very much, Luke, as well. He said, "Hello, Enforcer. Hello, Enforcer Matt. And hello, Luke." He said, "I really do love your channel. And please take a live chat question in LLT LSA."
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words and the support. And thank you for helping this thing to keep running. We love to know that you enjoy the channel and you want to help us to keep this thing rolling and keep the lights on and everything. It's a wonderful thing to know. It's a great thing to know. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the live chat question in honor of, good sir, Luke UK. The live chat question goes to Jeff Lieberman. And he said, "Why did the Taliban invade Pakistan and attack their border in the first place? Please, please."
The Taliban. So the basic rundown of the story is that there's this terrorist group that conducts attacks inside of Pakistan and then runs across the border into Pakistan for safety. And every single time the Pakistanis tried to deal with them, the Taliban got in firefights with them. So the Pakistanis started bombing them with airstrikes as a result of that, because they got tired of it. And then the Taliban conducted their ground offensive several days ago, and that's what led to the Pakistanis now curb stomping them, counterattacking them, and then marching into their country instead. So that's basically the rundown of everything that's happened in its quickest, most succinct form. So I hope that does address that. the best that we can. And a big thanks to you for sponsoring a live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Altered Gaming TV, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Altered Gaming, for that support. He said, thank you, Enforcers, for being my most reliable source of unbiased news. And we are in some wild times. And all the hard work you guys put into this is greatly appreciated. And LSA.
And LSA, and thank you so much for enjoying all the work and time we put into this. It means a lot for us to know that folks really do notice that and appreciate it a lot. And I got to thank you once again for helping this channel to keep running as well, because you help us to put all the time and effort into this thing. So a massive, humongous, big thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
And this one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a 12 Australian monies. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that 12 Australian monies right there. And we appreciate that very, very much. He said, Baba Moo Quack Woof. For the moving fund, and the marmot wants to come out. Oh, oh man, I'm telling you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I get no respect around here. I walked up to a marmot. I said, hey, what are you doing? He said, I'm not being a loser. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man. Oh, hello there. Hey!
Oh, hello there, good sir. They say we got a high incarceration rate. They say they're incarcerating them left and right. They say get over here and get yourself in handcuffs. Go ahead and put them on yourself. Arrest me, governor. Arrest me. Prosecute me, governor. Throw me in the pen. Throw me in the cell. Come on, throw me in D block. Send me in there with the gangs. The Marmot gang's the best of them all. The rest of the gangs are just wimps. But tell us more. The fur don't lie.
Aw, man, I want to eat some of those stir-fried rocks. Aw,
Oh,
man.
man. He wants to suck on rocks. That's not a shock. He wants those stir-fried rocks. He wants them with a little bit of soy on the side, a little soy sauce. That's what he wants. Here, sir. Here, have a nice bowl of fried rock. Here, have some. Here, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Aw, man. I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. That fly is revolting. But beyond that, it's wonderful to know that Alan the Marmot's here tonight. Thanks to Duncan VR. Hey! And I gotta say a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Because these folks like you help us to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. I gotta thank you incredibly for that. Incredibly. Because if it wasn't for you, Duncan VR, we wouldn't be able to have the animal noises. And we also wouldn't be able to have the marmot. And we love the marmot. And so with that, a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we're about to be moving on to the next one. But I saw an interesting comment in the chat. This one I was able to find because it was quite lengthy and it made it easy to detect. So I'm going to read it to all of y'all and then give my counter to it and then we'll see what they say. Someone said, get down off your high horse, guys. The press reports how they want and censors others not towing their line. They are not bastions of freedom. So what are the restrictions? I don't think you understand this. But the press is not supposed to be a bastion of freedom. They exist in their own ways, whether they're leaning hard left or hard right or somewhere in the middle, because they're supposed to be given the freedoms to be able to do what they want. The private entity does not have any responsibility to act like they are a bastion of freedom. That's why here on this channel, for example, we ban people as we please. When people cross the line here on this channel and break our rules, they get banned. That's also why we say what we say here on this channel, and we come up with our own conclusions and our own ideas, because we are given the general umbrella of the freedom of expression and freedom of the press to be able to run our news channel and cover news however we would like. There's no one telling us how to do it in the government. Now, that's the same thing with those companies. Whether you like them or not, Fox News has its right to be able to spew out its right-wing propaganda all day long, and CNN has its right to be able to spew out its left-wing propaganda all day long. I think that they are generally both the problem with news these days, but they still have the right to be the problem if they want to be. That is the right they have. There's no expectancy that private citizens are supposed to be whipped into shape, or private entities are supposed to be whipped into shape, to sit there and do what the government wants, or to do what's socially acceptable. Because, for example, where does that end at that point? Does it end with the press? No, it doesn't. It'll end with you as an individual. If it starts with the press, you see. It starts with what the government says is acceptable for the press to say, and then it goes down to what's acceptable for you to say. The freedom of the press will be the first to go because it's the easiest to target because it's usually done by organized entities like, for example, CNN, Fox, ABC, MSNBC, and so on. Then it moves down to pseudo news organizations like The Enforcer right here. And then it moves down to all of y'all who are listening on air right now. Because once they start to erode away the big chunks, like the major news organizations, it becomes a lot easier to target and prosecute people, just like they did those news companies, for whatever you say. And you might like it right now. I mean, I'm assuming from what you said, you're more so of a right-leaning person. But what if a left-leaning person comes into office because of the precedent that was laid out under this administration, and then they use it and swing the pendulum the other direction to persecute people like you who believe the way you do? Do they have a right to do that? The answer is no. Nobody has a right to do that. You have a right to believe whatever you want. I mean, you're clearly right-leaning because you said that all of these news organizations are leftist. You have a right to be a right-leaning person, and those news organizations that you don't like have a right to be left-leaning. That's the whole premise this country exists on. The beauty of it is you can sit there and shit on those news companies all day long because you call them leftists. You can be a right-wing person all day you want as well. That's how the country exists. It's a beautiful thing because no one forces you to think a certain way, say a certain thing, or even read those people's papers. If you don't like them, you can go buy a paper that agrees with you or you agree with them. That's how this country works. That's how it always should be working. There's no justification that I think could ever be given to sit there and cramp down on people's freedoms of expression and speech. If you disagree with us here on this channel, you might not be in the live chat for long, but there's nothing stopping you from saying wherever else you want to go on the internet that you do not like the Enforcer channel. That's something that's just a right out there in this country, and it always will be. And it's a great thing to have because it lets us here on the channel say that the president has made a poor foreign policy decision on the current president and the last president for multiple reasons. It lets us say that this is in American interest and this isn't. And for us to come up with our own independent judgment on that and not be prosecuted or persecuted for anti-governmental thoughts or anti-revolutionary thoughts or some sort of another free speech abridgment that usually exists in authoritarian states. That's why. That would be my counter to your statement. If you have a good counter to that of what I just said, I would be more than happy to hear it. But I cannot find any good justification or reason to silence voices in the press, in the public, or anywhere else for that matter, because that is simply an un-American principle. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, I see people giving examples like a fellow whose name I won't mention. Just by the way, that wasn't the government taking away anything from them. I'm sure y'all see the name in the chat. That was a civil lawsuit. So there was not the government doing something. I see the guy saying that again. That was a civil lawsuit against that guy, by the way. The government didn't take away anything. He got in trouble in court for something, which I'm not going to go into. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to Philip Harrison, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Philip, for that support. He said, LTLSA, and let's hope Putin doesn't do anything while you're moving, because we may not even hear about it because you're not here to report.
That's something we're worrying about so much, Philip, in every single area of the world. We're like, what if something happens here? What if something happens there? We're like, oh my God, we do not want to be off air for that because we know that a lot of y'all are really counting on us as y'all's only source of news. And we're like, we gotta be on air for y'all, but then we can't even be during that period. So we're hoping and praying as well nothing crazy happens because we won't even be able to cover it. We don't even have the ability to cover it at that point. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Stan the Man, who put in a 20. And thank you very much, Stan, for that $20 support. He said, the Enforcer channel is great info and extremely entertaining, and I hope the show makes it big time and keep it going.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words, Stan the Man. And thank you for saying that we're extremely entertaining on top of having good info. I worry a lot. I worry a lot off air about whether we're funny or not, or whether we're entertaining or not on air. And I'm so happy to know that usually the word back is that we are actually pretty fun to listen to. Because, oh my God, imagine if we weren't. Oh my God, I'd hate that. Like, I don't like shows that don't have good energy and a good kind of a vibe about them where it just feels like it's natural, it's normal. A lot of people like force some level of seriousness, or like they force themselves to be taken seriously by other people. I don't like that. I know a lot of y'all take us seriously on one end for what we do and what we cover, and then a lot of people laugh along with us with the jokes we make, or laugh at us sometimes because we do something silly on air. And I'm fine with either one of those. And I got to thank you so much, Stan the Man, for supporting the channel, so that way we can be around and keep the enforcer well on into the future, and to keep the LSA alive and beating as well. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Rye Guy SR, who also put in a 20, and thank you very much, Rye Guy, for that support. He said, what an experiment it would have been to have some of the best people the nation has to offer guarding some of the worst. And I think it would be surprising, and LLT and send all weapons with Hawk in the name to Ukraine. Honestly, Rye Guy, let's see here. I was trying to understand the first part here. I don't know if you're referring to like the Stanford prison experiment with that or not. How do you interpret that and force that first part?
I was actually interpreting it that way.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering if he was saying that. I'm not really sure about how that panned out with that. By the way, I think there was some controversy around it about whether or not it was like a valid experiment. I can't remember the whole story or not. I think it might still stand. I think that whole experiment right there. But honestly, I'm gonna have to withhold comment because it was about to get a little bit political there. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, it probably wouldn't end as well as people are thinking, to be entirely honest. I would say that's also another reason why I'm not for that, because, you know, imagine hearing that a member of the military beat a prisoner, you know, or something along those lines near to death. That wouldn't really go over well with most people, you know, and that started to turn favor away from the military. So that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't be a big fan of that. And before some people say, oh, that's impossible, you have not heard of the hazing charges that have come out of Parris Island in recent years, where people will get hazed near to death or die as a result of hazing. Parris Island's the worst for that. And you know, it's like you don't really want to bring that outside the military institutions and into a prison, you know, because those kind of people, the few that there are, they might come along for the ride, and then you'll end up with some very bad results. But also, I would have to say that I would agree with you on the last part, right, Guy? We should send everything with a Hawk to Ukraine immediately. And you know, there's actually this really cool vehicle, Matthew, that we haven't sent yet. It's called the Terrestrial Unmanned Automobile. And I think that we definitely should send the Hawk Tua to Ukraine and let them use that thing. You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, maybe so. I thought you were about to bring up that UAS Black Hawk, that new drone
no.
Black Hawk that came out. I don't know if you saw that, by the way, but that is super cool.
A UAS Black Hawk?
Yeah, it's like Lockheed Sikorsky came out with the new Black Hawk. It has like the front cargo doors on it. It's totally autonomous and flies itself.
Look at that.
Yeah, that thing right there. That is actually really cool. Like that's actually a really it's a simple but also very effective looking piece of kit right there.
That is really cool. Wow, I think that's the neatest thing. I actually haven't heard of this. I'm gonna have to look into that off air, folks. That is actually so interesting.
You know what's weird is people were called conspiracy theorists just as late as 6 months ago for saying that these existed right here. It turns out they did exist on an autonomous Black Hawk. People were making up all these statements saying the government has autonomous Black Hawks that fly themselves, and everybody's like, no, they don't, you liar, and stuff like that. And sure enough, here it is. It was being tested. So yeah, they did have them, and now they're here.
Man, what an interesting innovation! And it looks like it can carry small vehicles.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's just like that is actually a very cool thing. Can you imagine like a large fleet of these things right here? You don't have to jeopardize the lives of pilots nor anybody else on board. You can simply just fly this thing remotely to a place, drop off the cargo to the forward operating troops, and there's no risk at all to this right here. Now, it's a little bit sad on one aspect because now this is going to eliminate pilots from certain jobs from these helicopters, but at the same time, it's not going to put more troops in jeopardy.
Yeah, I just think actually it's great. The implementation of this thing would be amazing to see, really. I mean, that is just the coolest thing ever. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I actually didn't know about that. I'm sure a lot of people didn't know about that in the chat either. But still, with that, I hope we addressed that rabbit hole really well. That was actually a really cool one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, Rye Guy SR wanted us to grab a live chat question, and we'll go ahead and grab that one
Oh,
right now. And this one goes to Kendrick, who said, "Do you think that India will strike Pakistan while they're distracted by Afghanistan?"
I'm doubting it. I think India is kind of waiting for Pakistan to attack them because really the ball's in Pakistan's court to attack India. India is the one who holds the cards because they're stopping the flow of water consistently at this point. And so, because of that, the Pakistanis will be the ones to eventually have to attack the Indians. So, in the Indians' command circles, why in the world rush it? Let's just wait for the Pakistanis to attack us first. That way, we can also have the defensive justification in the long run. At least that's how I would think that the Indians would be thinking of the situation currently from a strategic standpoint. So I hope that does address it the best I can, in my opinion. And big thanks to you once again, Rye Guy SR, for sponsoring our live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, since we talked about the UAS Black Hawk, which is a pretty cool innovation that Lockheed Sikorsky came up with, have you also heard of Anduril's Eagle Eye that just came out, by the way? It's like this augmented AI glasses that you wear, and it puts a warfighting system right in front of your face, like with VR.
So that way the warfighter can be more competent and deadly. But is this it?
That is it. Click on the picture showing the full face, like from the front, that one of their on off to the left.
This one?
Yeah, the one there you go, that one right there. They even put like cat ears on the top of it. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, this thing is actually super capable right here. This is actually really cool. I believe it integrates with their mission command system. It's like some battlefield management system that they've come up with, and it lets you see through walls because it connects with drones too, if I have this correct. It connects with all the aerial assets that have visuals on the ground, and these goggles right here will let you see through containers, walls, concrete, and everything, as long as there's a drone in the air that lets you see through those walls. This is extremely impressive, by the way. Like I have like glazed Anduril for a long time. Anduril is literally like it's a startup, a tech startup that's in defense, but they're really coming up with some stuff that's even competing with the big dogs in the industry.
Man, I can already hear it. Hey, there's someone in that container. Oh my god! Call an admin, they're hacking! Like, bro, I can already see it coming, dude. Bro, Modern Warfare is actually turning legitimately into a COD lobby with hacks.
And it looks like it. It looks like it too. You know how Call of Duty Advanced Warfare had like that like UI that you'd run around and it like showed stuff. You'd look at it and it would show you what it was and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's literally this. It's literally modeled, and it's smart to do that too, because everybody plays video games now. Kids grow up on video games. So what better to do than to build VR glasses that have a built-in mission command UI in it, where you can see through the glasses, that is literally reminiscent of video games. They're already familiar with how to use the AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly crazy, man. But also, man, imagine now if someone in the military says there's someone in the walls, they're not schizophrenic anymore. They're really seeing them. Like, they're really seeing them through the walls. Like, it's crazy, the innovations these days. But yeah, actually, no, all jokes aside, this is actually incredibly cool. I really didn't hear about this much either. I gotta be honest with you, I need to start keeping up with U.S. military technology developments a little bit more, because I'm paying attention to everything going on in Ukraine and Russia, but most things in America seem to be slipping me by rather than the big ones like the nuclear reactors and all that sort of a deal.
Also, by the way, if you want to go to Anduril's site real quick, you can pull up Eagle Eye and actually show it. They actually have a little like thing here. I don't think they'd have a problem with us showing it, by the way, because we're basically giving them free marketing here, unless you think they would.
I don't know. I mean, they might.
There it is right there, by the way. That was it, a little clip of it. That was the UI that you see.
Oh my god, look, they got a whole menu. Dude, it's literally like a freaking video game. Like, it's legitimately a video game at this point.
Yeah, I'd like you can jump off of it, by the way, so that way we don't have any issues here. Go ahead and jump off of that tab. There you go. So there's like a little mini map off to the bottom left corner that shows you like the battlefield and where the enemy combatants are. It also highlights people that are walking around the battlefield and tells you who's friendly and not friendly. And it lets you see through walls too, so you can see like skeletal outlines of people walking behind solid objects. And honestly, it's literally like science fiction. It's a shame it's having to be deployed in such an environment as warfighting, because it would have been good to have the innovation on a different setting than that. But you know, war is usually where all the stuff comes from. You know, all these new innovations. It's usually sprung from war.
Oh man, imagine if they make that in the future to where you can add a gamer tag above you, for everyone else to see. You can customize it. Oh god, like oh god, man. Imagine what people are gonna give themselves as name tags above themselves in the system.
Honestly, that's insane, really.
Man,
Also, I find it funny that the founder of Anduril, who is Palmer Luckey, or I believe he's one of the founders, he created Oculus way back in the day. Y'all might remember that. It was a gaming headset. And I remember the very first ones he made. They were like very primitive. I really wanted one when he first started making dev kits for those, but I never got my hands on one. And it's funny that Anduril has come full circle back to making VR glasses now for the battlefield. He went from making gaming goggles, then now he's making like VR goggles for a battlefield setting that are super high tech. That's really crazy how far that guy's come.
Man, it really is crazy, man. I can't wait for the future. We've got our greatest warfighter. He was out there in the middle of Syria. He was slaying Russians, and they sat there and they told me, sir, he has a great username. And I said, what is his username? They said, on the FFR identifier in the goggles, the name tag said, Big Balls. And I said, well, get him on up here. Let's get him a Medal of Honor. I'm not going to lie, man. I think that the name tag innovation needs to not be added for that particular reason.
Man, imagine if they had proximity chat in the thing, like where you literally come in proximity with other people or whatever, like even the enemy just connects to their headset and you can communicate and trash talk.
He's being banned for abusive language. He sat there and called me a little sniveling bitch, and I didn't like that. And so we banned him from the server. And also, man, it's like at that
Calling
point,
the admin.
wait, bro, the JTAGs are the admins. Like, call up the admin. He needs to be permabanned. Hit him with an airstrike.
They said, admin, this guy is hacking, he's modding. They said he's got the aimbot turned on. You gotta ban him. You gotta ban him. Honestly, you gotta bring down the shadow government. They're the admin. The shadow government, the shadow wizard money gang. You gotta love it when they cast that spell.
Yeah, we sat there and we dropped a mop on the guy. He was pissing us off, and we said, moderator, we want them banned from the server. They said, no worries, it's being taken care of right now, and they dropped a mop on him, literally disintegrated him before the bomb even went off. The bomb went off 200 feet down, but he was gone well before then. Like, people said, wow, he couldn't have been gone quicker. He was gone in a flash. It was literally the bomb fell right on top of him, and like a Looney Tunes cartoon, he crashed down like an accordion straight into the ground. It was crazy. Never seen anything like that before, but the moderators took care of it really quick. Honestly, I kind of like this server. To be entirely frank with you, some people said, sir, what is your favorite server to play in? And I'll be honest with you, the Middle East is my favorite. The Sandbox is the greatest, and I have a great friend to play with, Netanyahu. We play games all across the Middle East. One time, though, he griefed Qatar. He hit it with a couple of missiles, and I said, that's not really cool. That's where I have my own little base. It's like Clash of Clans down there. You know, you set up a little wall, and you got a whole bunch of defensive stuff, and it's kind of neat like that. It's kind of cool, but he almost griefed my base trying to do that, and I said, whoa, that's not cool. Let's calm down there. Let's calm down. He apologized, and so we didn't have a server-wide crisis. We were about to have to call up the admins, the United Nations, and complain about that a little bit, but luckily it didn't get there. But beyond that, I hope that does address that little fun fact well about that new system. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Cody Bell, who puts in a 10. And Cody said, do you think that the U.S. may take advantage of the war between the Taliban and the Pakistan to reclaim Bagram Air Base with the help of the Pakistanis?
It's possible. It's not out of the question. That's a possibility, to be entirely honest. But a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Point of Guinness, who said, shush time. It's time to sleep. Shush, yawn, night, night.
Oh, shh, quiet, everyone. He's sleeping. But still, a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Septi Roth, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Septi Roth, for that $10 support. He said, Matt, the U.S. 100% dominated the Taliban in combat, and he seemed to suggest otherwise. And yes, it did. He said the U.S. didn't achieve a total victory, but that wasn't because the Taliban were kicking the U.S. tail in combat. I don't know. Like, I will give you this. I will say that the Taliban took a much higher casualty rate than the U.S. ever took. Like, the Taliban were getting wiped out. But the problem was, though, if we really dominated the Taliban 100%, then we wouldn't have been there for 20 years. That's like almost the same argument that Russia's making in Ukraine. They're saying, well, we're actually dominating Ukraine, but we were there for 4 years and it was only supposed to take 3 days. I just don't see it. I do believe the U.S. military is highly effective, but they were fighting an unconventional force that really just thought fighting was second nature, basically, and their ideology motivated them to no end. So I just don't think we did dominate them, honestly, or we wouldn't have been there for 20 years. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you massively for the support. Very kind of you. And I've got to say that I disagree with Enforcer Matt. The United States military steamrolled the Taliban. It was like no other. The Taliban, they would come up running and screaming, that usual stuff about that Aloha snack bar. And then we hit them with that airstrike. They would hardly get anyone. It was always really tough. They'd always go, "Where are the Americans?" We're shooting at a HESCO wall and there's no Americans. And then they get hit by a 2,000-pound JDAM from 30,000 feet up, and it would all be over for them. They'd be going to Valhalla or whatever the hell Kash Patel was talking about. But beyond that, one thing I'd have to say is that we definitely steamrolled those people. We definitely did. We only lost 2,000 guys. Say what?
But really, how though? I mean, if we're steamrolling them, how come we were there for 20 years and trying to like fight for every inch?
Well, we weren't fighting for every inch. It was an asymmetrical war. They pop up here, have a little fight, disappear, pop up somewhere else. That kind of a deal. We weren't really fighting for ground, say. It's asymmetrical. We already own the ground. It's just that they pop up from time to time, and we can't really tell who they are because they blend in with the people on the streets. You go out in the streets, and you look at Ahmed over there, and he could just be some random guy. And then you look at Wasim on the other side of the street, and he could be Taliban. You couldn't tell. They all dressed like civilians, crazy stuff. But beyond that, the losses were incredibly low. Over 20 years, we only lost 2,100 guys. That's a lot of guys, but still, that's not too bad. The Russians lose that in about a day. The Taliban, on the other hand, they lost hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands. You just simply couldn't see numbers like that. They said, sir, the numbers, they've never been higher. They've never seen something like this. And I said, that's right, because America's always dominating. I mean, we couldn't kill off their ideology in the end, but we did take out a lot of Taliban. That's one thing we certainly did, but I hope that does address that the best we can. A big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Barry Young, who puts in a $10 support, and thank you very much, Barry, for that support. He said a tip for the Marmot for his service as the LSA mascot.
Hey, and we will. And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that addresses that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Eternal Core, who puts in a 10. And he said, I'm in the hospital for 7 days watching this video, and you guys are pulling my heartstrings, lol. So when do you think World War III will start? And I hope we're safe in Canada. And he said, I bet my city is a nuke target.
Oh, I'm sure y'all are safe in Canada. We're mostly all safe here in the Americas until the last moments in that sort of a war. But generally, I would say that World War is probably going to be, if it does break out, and that's heavily dependent on the if it does, probably within the next 2 years, really probably within the next year and a half, most likely. That's what I would think. But I do thank you for support, and I'm glad to know that we've been keeping you company while you've been in the hospital for a while, and I hope that you're getting on the mend so that we can be back out here in the world at your house watching the Enforcer. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best we can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Z3R0, who puts in a 10. And he said, knowing what we know now today about Russia and their wide use of drones, do you think the drones that we saw earlier this year all over the northeastern U.S. could have been Russian?
I would doubt it, because we know that the government stated that they were conducting drone tests at this point, so highly unlikely. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Golden850, who puts in that 5, without a comment, that is. But thank you very much, Golden, for that support, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 5 from Mark Dixon, who did not leave a comment either. But a huge shout to you, Mark, as well, for that support. And we have a 5 from Robert Krogan, who said, so are more B-2s ordered? And also, Robert, I think there was a misspeaking today by the U.S. officials. They did order more B-21 Raiders, but I don't think they ordered more B-2s. The B-2 is an outdated aircraft. It was designed and developed way, way, way back in the day. I can't remember. It's like that. Wasn't it like the 1980s or something? It was designed.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an old aircraft. It's definitely not new, but the B-21 Raider is new, though. So I think that's what we ordered, is that new, sleeker one, not the old one. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's what I understood as well, but I'll make sure to check back on that and double make sure. But big thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from the Wolfman, and he said, "I've been on a Star Trek binge as of late." And also, by the way, that's weird because I have been as myself just out of the blue. It must be that time of year. But he said, "If you guys are Trekkies, what era of shipbuilding?" And for me, it's the movie era, the TMP Undiscovered Country. Honestly, for me, I'm not a huge like Trekkie person where I'm like obsessed with it, but I do enjoy like the older series of Star Trek. I like the original series the most, which is the one that most people aren't too hot about. But I like that one. I think it was the best one with the best writing of all of them. So I would say that era personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I'm not really a big Trekkie, but like everything, I somehow unfortunately get a photographic memory of everything. So I do know what you're talking about. And I would actually have to agree with you. I think that, let's see, NCC 1701, 1701. Don't judge me, folks. I'm not like a huge nerd. It's just that I remember this from forever. This is probably the coolest one, in my opinion, out of the Enterprises, because I didn't like the original series warp nacelles that they had on that starship. I thought they looked pretty goofy. This looked more realistic to me, at least in my mind, and I was like, that looks cooler. I think it looks better, and it's not also weird like the original one. Let me go get that one. This one. I didn't like this one because those little orange glowing things. Like I thought that looked dumb. I thought this looked a lot cooler. And also I like the let's see, the NCC 1701-B. This one, which I think is the Excelsior class, if I remember correctly. This one was also really cool, and I really like that one. So I'll be honest with you, I'm also a big fan of the movie era myself. I didn't really like the Enterprise C, which only had a guest appearance once in the Next Generation, or the Enterprise D. And also, I thought the Enterprise E was kind of like losing the whole deal. I just didn't like that one at all. I thought it was a little bit too far from form. But I would agree with you. I think that movie era of starship design was probably the coolest looking. Although, to be honest with you, I'm not really a big fan of the movies. I'm actually a bigger fan of the Next Generation myself. I thought that was probably the best one that they came out with, and also it showed because it was one of the longest running Star Trek series that was out there. So I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And I hope that addresses the question well, at least from my point of view. I think that movie era was probably the best design of Starship myself personally. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, a huge shout to the Dauntless Dutchman for throwing in a $50 support. And I think I called that one off earlier, but I don't recall saying the name. So I wanted to return back to that one and give a shout out to you real quick because I remember reading your comment, but for some reason I don't remember reading off your name. So wanted to give a huge shout to the Dauntless Dutchman for that very generous support once again. And we also have a super chat that just came in. Let me try to get the spreadsheet organized again. This one goes to none other than Nathan Schneider, who put in the 10. And he said, Afghanistan was also drawn out because of the insane rules of engagement placed on our soldiers. It made it way more dangerous for them, and the enemy knew these rules and took advantage.
Thank you for the support. And the rules of engagement were pretty strenuous, very strenuous from what I've heard in Afghanistan. That's true. But on the counter side, though, the Soviets had literally no rules of engagement, and that didn't really do them any good either. I mean, to be entirely honest, it's just dangerous to be fighting an asymmetrical war in general, rules of engagement or not. And the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan is historical proof that no matter what type of rules engagement you have, whether very extreme or very non-existent, it almost ends up producing the same result. As a matter of fact, the Soviets lost more people with no rules of engagement than the U.S. did with extremely strenuous rules of engagement. So, I mean, even at that point, you can make the argument that the strenuous rules of engagement, while making it feel dangerous, at least statistically, actually leaded to less casualties, at least with our approach to the situations that U.S. soldiers were being seen in inside of Afghanistan over those 20 years. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next support here goes to Dylan Gray, who put in a 5. And thank you very much, Dylan, for that support. He said, it literally looks like they're loading velociraptors into that thing.
Which thing? Which one was he talking about?
I'm not sure. Maybe you
oh,
meant
the nuclear reactor. That's what he's talking about.
Oh.
Let me go show that, because now I'm seeing it. Yeah, it does. It looks like a Jurassic Park enclosure with like the little fence surrounding it. Yeah, it actually does. It does.
It kind of does look like it could be that.
It kind of does. Also, why in the world are these guys wearing like bomb team suits?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to help you if you have a meltdown.
Man, that guy's going, do you taste metal? Anyways, moving on from that.
Do you taste graphite? That's not graphite on the ground.
There's all graphite on the roof, damn it. But anyways, a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Blind Man, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, good evening, Enforcers and LSA. And what are your thoughts on the new Lockheed Martin U-Hawk, or Autonomous Black Hawk? Honestly, I think it's fantastic. It's the best thing since U-Haul, the U-Hawk. But I personally think it's really cool. Honestly, I think it's a really cool invention. And I don't know why they didn't think of it sooner. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for supporting. I'd also have to say that thing is cool as beans. That thing is really neat to me. So a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Vito Val88, who put in a 5 and said, imagine how many 3D printers printing drone parts at military bases around the world with nuclear reactors. And I don't know, but freedom will be cheap.
I got to say, that's a very interesting point right there. Nuclear power screams of freedom. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one, folks. But before we do, I do want to say this really quickly. Someone brought up Star Trek, and they said Star Trek did something recently, and then it was irreparably damaged. I was actually telling Matthew the other day about that. And what's interesting about that is that it's always relative to the time that Star Trek comes out, because every single Star Trek is always pushing the social boundary, whether people know it or not. Because back when the original Star Trek came out, and this is a point that actually was really big for the original series back then, is that the original series of Star Trek from the late 1960s was the first television show in America to ever have any sort of interracial romance shown on air, which was considered to be extremely political during that period of time, because it was literally just a few years after the 1965 Civil Rights Act was passed. And so a lot of people always think that nowadays it's pushing the boundary, but the truth is that it was always pushing the social boundary through pretty much every single period of history that the show's run in any other series. It's just that to you now, it doesn't seem that controversial because all of those political topics have pretty much come and passed and have already been decided. It's the ones that are modern that seem like they're really pushing the boundary now, and that's because they're relevant to the modern day and period. Although I'd have to be honest, I just don't really think modern Star Trek content's that good. It kind of feels like it lost like that Star Trek magic that a lot of the older series had. Nothing to do with the politics, it's just to do with its delivery, and I don't really think the modern delivery of the stuff is that good, to be entirely honest. But anyways, with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to David Croton, who puts in a $20 support, and thank you very much, David, for that 20, and we do appreciate it. He said, take one from the chat, and thank you, boys.
And I got to thank you so much for support, and we will take one from the chat, and huge thanks to you, and helping this channel to keep on running. So what do we got from the chat, Matthew?
And this one goes to Deutsche Eve, who said, who would y'all say is the good guy in the Afghan-Pakistan war going on? Honestly, I don't really care for either side, to be honest with you, very much, because Pakistan has their own issues going on. Definitely don't care for the Taliban, definitely not. They took out a lot of our guys when we were in Afghanistan, so got some against them. I would say between the two, it had to be Pakistan, but just because the Taliban are so awful, that's the only reason that's the only reason Pakistan's better. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree with that one 100%. I'm not really a big fan of either one. That's why I say we don't have a dog in the fight. But if we had to pick one, I would pick the Pakistanis over the Taliban every single day. So with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to none other than Hoodoo, Texas, who puts in the 5. And he said, the old Austrian painter fellow, the failed painter, declared war on the U.S. 4 days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
That's true, but the Germans didn't really get involved in bringing the war to America after that declaration of war. We pretty much had to bring it to them. The first time that the Nazi Germans ever fought us, it was when we joined the British and the French in pushing through North Africa. So, even still, that's it's a bit of a different comparison than today, where the Russians would actually have to take a concerted effort to directly fight us in a major ground war immediately with no delay. So it's not as easy a decision to make for them. But I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support. But that is still a good point. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jay from Tech, who puts in a 5. And he said, do you think we are preparing a blockade in Venezuela for oil in case World War III breaks out?
I think we're preparing a blockade on Venezuela so that way we can start a war with them and remove the Chinese influence primarily. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a huge shout to Genghis Khan for putting in a 5. And also a huge shout to Plazath for putting in a 2. They did not leave comments, but thank you very much, Genghis and Plazath, for that support. We also have a 5 from Drops Homestead. And they said, going to Utah, let's see here. Also, he mentioned someone here that does stock trading, by the way. And he said, they are there for you, brother. Just saying.
And I thank you for the support, and we'll look into that. Thank you for the suggestion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Grant Porras, who said, did you hear anything about the 6,500 Army aviation personnel who are being made to change to different MOS, preparing for autonomous aviation advances? What?
I actually had not heard about that. Had you, Matthew?
No, I hadn't heard about that. That's wild right there. So you're telling me they sign... Now, the Army guarantees your MOS, don't they, when you sign up in the Army, right?
I think they do, but I don't think they guarantee that you'll never be reassigned.
That's wild, though. Like, if you've gone through all that training to fly helicopters or be a pilot, or not be a pilot, but be a helicopter pilot, that's tough right there, just to get changed from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what do they do with them now? It's like, what MOS do these people go to? Do they get to pick that? Like, and also we know the training is obviously going to be provided, it's going to be free, and they'll just retrain them into something else. But that's still wild, though. 6,500 men. That's about 2 whole brigades worth of men that are being reassigned into new positions. That's unfortunate to hear. But with that, I hope that does address that well. I actually hadn't heard of that, though. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for the support as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Octavian Timorsanu, who puts in a 5. He said, the Pakistanis fighting the Afghans is like the old-time Germany of the bad era fighting the Soviets. They're both bad guys.
I would agree, but still, like someone said earlier, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, and so for that reason, the Pakistanis end up pretty much being like the modern Soviet, in a sense. But I definitely would agree with you, Octavian Timurasanu. Not really good options there to pick from either way. But a big thanks to you so much for the support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 2. And he said, tell the rat. He said he wants to tell the rat something here. I can't read it off on the air, though. But thank you very much, Bruce, for that support. And that is a rat. But also, we have a 2 from Hoodoo, Texas, who said, commies lie and say truth with equal enthusiasm. Honestly, that's anybody these days. It's not exclusive to commies anymore. Everybody feels like they say stuff with lies and enthusiasm, and they'll get away with it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with that as well. I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Derek Pruce, who said the Enforcers slaying the news once again. T1 FTC.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying the news that we put out here. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the live chat question goes to Concerned War, who said, wait, did he say that Belarus threatened nuclear war? And that's right. He said, are they even a nuclear power?
We don't really know, actually. We think that the Russians may have given them some nuclear weapons at some point, but it's been so ambiguous, we can't really tell. They may have been saying that on the behalf of the Russians. They may have been saying that on their own accord. We don't really know. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that answer, because we don't have enough information to know the exact context that they meant behind that either. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, just to let y'all know, tomorrow's short war video is probably going to be crazy. Right now, Pakistan and Afghan forces are going wild right now. But our next one here, our next super chat, goes to Duke Old Fart 1961, who puts in a 2. He said, do you want some cheese to go with all that wine?
Sure. Why not? Make it charcuterie. Bring out some ham. Or maybe some beef, because we got plenty of beef against our enemies. But still, a big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that is addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, Matthew, I like how you said that just a second ago, man. It literally sounded like a trailer. Be ready for tomorrow, as we will have great news coming out. It's like, man. It's like, bro, we're giving a trailer to the Afghan-Pakistani war.
Be sure to tune in tomorrow for the fantastic news at 5 p.m. Central with Wolf Spritzer.
Tune in tomorrow at 5 p.m. with Enforcer Matt for some crazy news. Shows like clips of the firefights, like little tiny ones. Tomorrow, expect major action and excitement in Afghanistan as the Pakistani and Afghan army go at it. Who's gonna win? Find out tomorrow. It's like, man, honestly, man, it's crazy how this stuff works these ways, folks. Like, it's literally just endless war out there these days. I feel like we could take that Warhammer 40K like intro where they're like, "It is the 41st millennium, and there is only war," and just apply it to the modern day, and it works. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, and apparently nobody's ever heard of that meme. Like, there was a picture that Wolf Blitzer put out a long time ago. He said, "I'm in the El Presidente restaurant having a Wolf Spritzer," and he was like showing the menu like of a Wolf Spritzer on the menu or something. It was like some alcoholic drink or something. And somebody's taking it the wrong way. That's not like a dirty joke or something like that. It's just a drink that they had. It's called Wolf Spritzer. Say what?
Hey, yo, what? Hold up. Like, man, I'm just playing with you. I'm just kidding with you.
Oh. Oh, dang, man. I thought you were being serious. But, yeah, it was like a Wolf Spritzer thing. He was like, "I'm having a Wolf Spritzer." They had like a whole after action recap about that because there was a whole like controversy about it because it turns out like right after or allegedly the timing was weird. It kind of lined up with like one presidential candidate dropping out of the race. So they thought he was celebrating the dropping out of a presidential candidate, but it was just bad timing on the post. But yeah, the whole Wolf Spritzer thing, that was a whole thing like a while back. But anyways, enough yapping from me. It's time to hear what everybody else was yapping about. And first of all, we have to hear what the Morse code decoders were yapping about. Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Johnny Dog, Norm Project, Airbo Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Colbert, Terek, Sire, and Brian's Blairstown came in with that Morse. And they said Afghanistan a bit off. More than they could chew. Attacking a well-armed nuclear power. LOL. LLT LSA.
Bro, you read out that lol so funny. Dude, honestly, that was the best read off we've gotten in a while, but that's the sound of money, lol. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all, the Least Army Signal Corps, for getting that correct, because it is an absolutely wonderful and incredible thing to know that y'all continue to get the Morse code message correct time and time again. And so, of course, folks, we're going to be moving on into the live chat questions, and due to us running overtime, we're unfortunately only going to be able to get 3 live chats, and then we're going to be rounding this thing out. And also, unfortunately, I could not type this, so I have to ask, concerned citizen, who are you talking to? Are you talking to us or someone else? I don't know who, but please let us know. But anyways, with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Alex Williams. He said, question, does Belarus have the codes to arm the nukes, or does Russia still hold onto the codes? Honestly, here's my speculation, Alex. I think that Belarus is simply serving as a storage location for nukes. They probably have mobile launchers to use them, but the codes, though, I would say they probably did not give Lukashenko the codes. If something, for example, if Belarus needed to launch the nukes, I'm sure Lukashenko would have to go to the phone and go, "Vladimir Putin, can I please have the codes to launch a nuke at them, please?" And Putin would have to go, "Yes, my precious. Yes, you can. Here's the codes." Honestly, though, I don't think they gave him the codes. Like, I don't think Russia would be that stupid to trust Lukashenko with nukes and give them the power to launch them either, because Lukashenko could get tired of being a puppet of Russia and simply launch them back at Russia in retaliation if they wanted to. So Putin's not that stupid. He wouldn't do that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'd highly doubt that he'd do that as well. I have a feeling that the Russians retained access to the codes. It's just that the nuclear weapons, if they are there, they are based in Belarus but operated by the Russians. That's what I would assume. So I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, so try to pick from our last remaining questions here. Let's see here. This one goes to Saint Sir Nicholas. He said, is Pakistan just causing havoc? Are they trying to force peace? Or are they trying to conquer land?
I would say that they're really just pissed off with the Taliban and they're just taking it out on them. It's that's really all I can chalk it up to, because that's really how this whole thing started with them airstriking the Taliban, was that they just got sick of their crap and they just started bombing them. I don't really know what their objectives even are. It's literally like they just got tired of them and started bombing them and shooting them, and then they're figuring out everything else as they go. So I actually do not know what their end goal really is. We've tried to rationalize it through tonight, but I really don't even know, actually. Like, we have no clear proof from the Pakistani government, from their own words, of what they're really even going for at this point. So I'd assume that they're going for some sort of a negotiated settlement with the Afghans, but I think that's all I could come up with.
Do you think that Pakistan's feeling extra agitated because India keeps turning on and off the water faucet to the people, so they're getting irritated, and also it's like basically like they're getting prodded by India over and over because one minute they have water, next minute they don't have water, and they're getting antsy, so they're like really anxious to take it out on the Taliban. Because honestly, I can see the tensions they have with India. Obviously, India and Pakistan, they're like raring to go at each other. But the whole Taliban situation is kind of left field, even though, there's a reason for it, but it's kind of still left field.
Yeah, I would have to say, dude, honestly, man, you can make a good, like, comedy thing of, like, India, like, turning on a faucet going, and then turning it back on, no, you're not getting it, psych, and then the Taliban comes up behind Pakistan while they're getting aggravated by the Indians, pokes them with, like, a needle, and then Pakistan turns around and goes, come here, and then just starts beating their ass. Man, honestly, that probably is what's going on. Maybe they're just angry, and maybe they're trying to flex their muscles at the Indians by just beating up the Taliban for a second, and making an example of them. Maybe that's it.
And honestly, Pakistan said, damn, I'm so mad. Stop turning off our water. They said, come here, Taliban. They started beating the shit out of the Taliban. And honestly, man, the Taliban's catching a stray. Pakistan's feeling a little antsy, feeling a little wound up. So the Pakistanis can't quite tangle with India quite the same way as they can tangle with the Taliban. So the Taliban are just catching a left hook. Honestly, Pakistan's throwing a pretty strong left hook at the Taliban. But yeah, honestly, Pakistan's got a big problem, though, because they're pretty much surrounded by enemies at this point. They've got Afghanistan on the left side, they've got India on the right side, and Pakistan was whooping India's ass last time, in my personal opinion, but I'm not sure if they can handle multiple different fronts at the same time. That might be way too much for Pakistan to chew off.
But then they got them nukes. Like
That's right.
That settles it all. So that's their trump card in the end, is just whipping out a nuke on someone. But honestly, I would say they're just kind of hauling off on the Taliban, kind of just because I really can't come up with a good answer. I'd try, and I hope that the answer seems reasonable, but I really don't know why they're doing this. But anyway, I'll be honest with y'all. That's literally the whole year. Everyone used to ask us back in the day, what's this, what's that? And we would have some really good answers because it would be obvious. Nowadays, this year, the answer has literally almost always been in every situation, they're just beating each other's asses just because they can. Like, there's really no reason for it, no rhyme to it. It doesn't make any sense, but they're all going at it like it does. And we can't even really find any underlying logic to most, if not all of it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that question well. And with that, folks, it's time for us to get to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one's actually a super chat that came in last minute from Snowdog596. And thank you very much, Snowdog, for that very generous $50 support. He said, you need that intro for sure. 100, 100. All we have is war, and that would be epic.
You know, I think that I was actually thinking about that. I would love to get another orchestral soundtrack. Problem is, those cost thousands of dollars, and that's like financially infeasible to do often. That was like our magnum opus thing, was to have our own custom-made intro from start to finish. And unfortunately, like I think the next time I do that, folks, because that's something that I took on myself, like spent my own money and stuff doing. I think I'm gonna have to like fundraise for that if we want new, fresh music in the intro, because I don't think I can financially cover something like that again. It was incredibly expensive. But beyond that, I think that would be incredibly cool to do an intro to where it's not exactly like a patriotic song or a cover. It's just a really good orchestral track, and it's just something like, it is the it is the second millennium and there is only war, and then like show everything that's been going on in the world over the past year as a part of that intro as the music plays over it. I mean, that would be crazy. Or we could do that one meme where it's like that tornado warning in America, and then you hear the president go, we're gonna bomb this shit. Like it does that deal. We could also do that. That gets to the point across too. But still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Snowdog, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to have baller intros. And so humongous thanks to you so much once again, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, it is time for us to round out tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run the stream for nearly 4 hours tonight. Holy moly. I lost track of the time, folks, actually. I thought it was like maybe like a normal length stream. This is almost a marathon length. And also, we had a peak viewership of 15.5 thousand people, and 99,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. I hope y'all sleep well tonight, and if you're not sleeping well, you're probably in Europe and you just woke up. So I hope you have a great day, and then sleep well at the end of that day, and see us tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Hurram Slava! Long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us yet again on yet another day of the War News Stream here on the channel. And we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern and also midday as well for the short war video if there is enough news to cover. And I have a feeling there might be enough news to cover, by the way, because I'm seeing it come out right this second. So, also, by the way, let me get rid of this guy right here. Also, by the way, like a quick note, like I don't mean to drag out the exit here, but I hate it when people come and get political just about Argentina just because the guy's a political figure now. Like, it's so irritating. But anyways, folks, thank you to all 100,000 plus people that were here by the end of the stream, and we will see you all tomorrow. And with that, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.